My parents left me with my grandparents for my siblings' sake. Years later, I planned a special dinner, but they prioritized my brother's gift instead. I'd like to make it clearly obvious that I've never been the favorite child in my family. This is not an exaggeration or a fake idea that I made up. It is a very genuine and major component of my existence. Growing up, my parents never concealed the fact that my younger brother's life was more important to them than mine. For reference, my mother became pregnant with my brother only a year after I was born. While it was not a planned pregnancy, my parents were pleased with the prospect of expanding their family. However, their delight swiftly changed to dread when physicians did several tests and revealed that the baby may have major health difficulties. These were not trivial worries. They were serious enough that my parents had to make the sad decision to terminate the pregnancy. They eventually agreed to continue, fully aware of the potential hurdles. When my brother Jackson was born, their concerns were realized. He had serious heart abnormalities that necessitated prompt treatment. My folks were distraught. Jackson needed many procedures to survive and spent extensive time in the hospital. His health became the primary focus of my family's life, and this transition had a significant impact on everything, including how I was treated. My parents were obsessed with worry, love, and guilt about Jackson's health. While I recognized that they were dealing with a really tough situation, it also meant that I was largely marginalized. My parents were too worried with Jackson's medical demands, so I stayed with my grandparents while he was in the hospital. During this time, they paid me just occasional visits. Even at such a young age, I tried not to hold it against them. I recognized that Jackson's health came first, and my parents were trying their best. Besides, I really liked my time with my grandparents. They were nice and attentive. Every morning, my grandma made me breakfast, and we spent hours doing simple things around the house, like baking cookies or taking care of her garden. My grandfather used to take me to the park and read me stories. They filled in the gaps left by my parents' absence, becoming almost like a second set of parents for me. Jackson's condition gradually improved, and my parents were allowed to bring him home from the hospital. You'd assume this would be the point where my parents would come to get me, where they'd like to reconcile the family. But no, it was not the case. My mother, still burdened by the stress of Jackson's recuperation and the effort of caring for a sick child, decided she was not ready to take on the responsibility of 2 children. She informed my grandparents that they would need to continue caring for me for a bit longer. My father, who was preoccupied with work and attempting to balance Jackson's medical expenditures, also provided little assistance. My grandparents, who genuinely enjoyed having me around, didn't say anything when my parents opted to leave me with them for a longer period of time. They were delighted to keep me with them. While I was saddened to learn that I would not be returning home, I was not devastated. I was still in a location where I felt loved, which reassured me. The true issue arose when years passed and my parents still showed no desire to bring me back home. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement lasted eternally. I could only visit them every other weekend, and that wasn't assured. My father was sometimes too busy at work, and other times they simply did not make an effort to visit. My grandparents were my primary caregivers, while my parents felt more like tourists than parents. When I first started school, my grandparents took care of everything. They dropped me off in the morning, picked me up in the afternoon, and were there from the moment I awoke until I was tucked into bed. They made sure I got my school materials, assisted me with my homework, and kept me healthy. In contrast, my parents never checked on me. They didn't care if I went to school every day or how well I did academically. If I was sick, my grandparents would look after me. My grandparents seemed to have taken on all of my parents' obligations. When my parents came to visit, they only talked about Jackson. They would tell my grandparents how amazing Jackson was, how brave he had been while recovering from his surgeries, and how far he had come. I don't think they ever asked my grandparents how I was doing, what was going on in my life, or how I felt. I started to feel totally invisible. I can't remember a single instance when my parents and I spent time together, just the 3 of us. There was no one-on-one time, and no attempt to repair any bond with me. It was always about Jackson. Then came the moment I'll never forget, Jackson's birthday celebration. My parents organized a great celebration for him because he was doing so well. They invited everyone, friends, family, and neighbors. My grandparents brought me along. Throughout the celebration, I couldn't get over my intense envy as I saw Jackson, so joyful, with my parents doting on him continuously. The entire celebration revolved around him, and while I understood it was his special day, I couldn't help but feel entirely excluded. I was a youngster as well, but my brother received all of the attention, love, and care that I craved. I'm not sure when or how, but the strong feelings of witnessing my parents around my younger brother surfaced. Before I knew it, I had broken into tears in front of everyone. I remember feeling so embarrassed in that moment, knowing that everyone could see me unraveling. My grandparents, bless their hearts, promptly brought me to a room and attempted to console me, but the pain and jealousy were too great. I believe some of the other visitors noticed and attempted to console me, but nothing genuinely improved my mood. It wasn't about the gifts or the party, it was about the attention and love I so desperately craved. Watching my parents lavish Jackson with attention and love was simply too much for me to stomach. Later, after the birthday party, my parents and grandparents had a heated argument. Apparently, my parents were embarrassed by my emotional outburst at the celebration. They thought it was foolish of me to cry in front of everyone, and they believed my actions had drawn unwanted attention to them. It wasn't simply that I was irritated, it had caused others to doubt my living circumstances. Guests began to question why I wasn't at home with my parents, why I was being raised by my grandparents, and if my parents were abandoning me. My parents were unhappy with the scrutiny and blamed me for forcing them to explain themselves. Following the disagreement, I made a decision. I would return home to live with my parents. This was something I had wanted for years, but when it finally happened, I didn't feel as excited as I had hoped. Instead, I felt apprehension. The first few days back home were incredibly awkward. The house felt foreign to me, and I frequently felt out of place, as if I were invading someone else's territory. My parents designed their routines totally on Jackson's wants and schedule. They rarely acknowledged me, and when they did, it was always in passing. I had imagined that moving back home would finally make my parents notice me, that they would care about me as much as they did about Jackson. However, it soon became evident that nothing had changed. Jackson was still the center of their universe, while I remained on the periphery, disregarded and forgotten. I was merely happy to have my own room. I spent the majority of my time there while I wasn't in school. I didn't want to be alone, yet being around my parents made me feel even more inconspicuous. At least in my room, I didn't have to watch their devotion for Jackson while I went unnoticed. I'd spend hours there, completing my homework or lying on my bed, trying to make sense of everything. Throughout my scholastic years, my parents exhibited no interest in my studies or accomplishments. They never asked about my schoolwork or attended any of my award ceremonies. Even when I participated in school plays or extracurricular activities, they didn't bother showing up or acknowledging my participation. It seemed like nothing I did mattered to them. Despite their utter contempt for my accomplishments, I made an effort to excel in school. My grandparents' limited attempts to intervene and remind my parents of my accomplishments were received with silence or plain disdain. They would push my parents to express their happiness or gratitude for me, but they either disregarded or scoffed, as if my accomplishments were unimportant. It stung so much to see how little they cared, especially given how they handled Jackson. Jackson never did well academically. He struggled in school and frequently got into trouble. He would bring home low grades, and his teachers would occasionally call home to discuss his behavior. But none of this seemed to bother my parents. They never held Jackson responsible for his lack of effort, and they certainly did not chastise him. If he ever managed to score even nearly average on a test or accomplish something minor, my parents would praise it as if it were a monumental feat. They would order pizza or take us out to his favorite restaurant, making it a huge family outing. When I finally finished high school and was accepted to college, I was fortunate to receive a partial scholarship. Even though it paid some of the fees, I was concerned about how I would handle the remaining bills. At the time, I asked my parents if they had set up a college fund for me. Part of me knew the answer, yet I felt compelled to inquire. As expected, they promptly informed me that all of the money they were saving was for Jackson. They stated he was the youngest and would need to be cared for in the future. My father openly informed me that as the oldest, I needed to learn to take care of myself. He did offer to assist me in applying for an education loan, which I would then be responsible for repaying once I found work. It was quite painful to learn that my own parents continued to disregard me. While most parents are delighted and proud to assist their children in their transition into adulthood, mine were practically telling me I was on my own. Fortunately, my grandparents saw this coming long before I did. They had been quietly planning for my future and had secretly established a trust fund for me years before. When they finally revealed this to me and told me that I didn't have to worry about college, I was completely surprised. I couldn't believe someone cared enough to do this for me. I cried with excitement because, for the first time, I felt truly supported. It was surreal. No one had ever gone to such lengths to protect me. My grandparents not only saw my talent, but they also took steps to ensure that I could attend college without financial constraints. However, when my parents learned about the trust fund that my grandparents had established for me, they did not share my excitement or relief. Instead of being delighted for me, they immediately turned the subject to Jackson. Their first query to my grandparents was if they had also established a trust fund for Jackson. My grandfather gently explained that they had intentionally chosen to care for me because my parents had always favored Jackson. They indicated that they had witnessed for years how I had been disregarded and wanted to give me a fair shot to thrive without being held back. Naturally, this did not sit well with my folks. They felt it as unfair and quickly got into a furious dispute with my grandparents about how both grandchildren should be treated equally. They accused my grandparents of favoritism and demanded that Jackson, as the youngest member of the family, deserved his share of the money. They couldn't believe my grandparents had chosen to help me because they saw how neglected I had been all these years. My parents seemed to be unaware that they had spent Jackson's entire life treating him as if he were the center of the universe. Despite the pressure and accusations, my grandparents held their stance. They refused to back down or let my parents manipulate the issue. They clarified that this was not about favoritism, rather, it was about ensuring that I have the same opportunities as Jackson, which my parents had previously provided. My grandparents made their decision out of love and fairness, knowing that I had not received the same attention and support that Jackson had. After failing to persuade my grandparents, my parents focused their efforts on me. They tried to persuade me to share some of the trust fund with them, claiming that I should invest in Jackson's future when he went to college. They portrayed it as if I was greedy for retaining the money for myself, despite the fact that it was not mine to give away, it was a gift from my grandparents. I refused. I informed them that it was not my obligation to care for Jackson's schooling, especially since they had always stated that their financial priority was with him. My parents were unhappy about my decision, but there was nothing they could do. For once, they did not have the upper hand. I wasn't going to give away what had been given to me out of love and care because they thought Jackson deserved it all. It was a heartbreaking realization that even in this situation, my parents could not be happy for me. But it was also powerful because I understood I needed to stand up for myself, even if it meant defying my parents. As a result, my connection with my parents deteriorated significantly after I departed for college. They cut off practically all touch with me, convinced that what I had done was selfish toward my brother. Jackson and I had never been close. He was content being the preferred child, and with me out of the house, he didn't have to compete for our parents' attention. He never contacted or visited me when I was at college. While it was unsurprising, it still stung. My grandparents were the only ones that actually cared and remained in my life. They were my emotional support system, always checking in on me, encouraging me, and ensuring I didn't feel completely abandoned. But then, in my third year of college, my life was turned upside down. My grandfather died unexpectedly from a heart attack in his sleep. His death left me shattered. It was, without a doubt, the darkest period of my life. I spent several days with my grandmother while we mourned together. It was a devastating loss for both of us. My grandfather had been a father figure to me in every manner that mattered, and losing him created a void in my heart. During this hard time, something unexpected happened. I bonded with my parents and Jackson. My grandfather's death shook all of us, and for the first time in years, we found ourselves connecting over our shared sadness. Despite my many unresolved issues for my parents, something about the incident brought us closer. For a brief moment, it felt as if the barriers between us had fallen. My grandfather had even left a letter for my mother. In it, he begged her to stop ignoring me and to care for both of her children, not just Jackson. He reminded her of the value of family and how she couldn't afford to continue treating one child better than the other for all these years. I guess something changed after that. Perhaps for the first time, my parents appeared to be genuinely sorry for how they had treated me. They slowly began to make an effort to reconnect. They began calling me more regularly, inquired about my studies, and shown an interest in my life. It wasn't perfect, the anguish of the past couldn't be erased that easily, but it was something. I was still upset with them for all the years they had disregarded me and for not being there when I needed them. But, at the same time, I could see they were trying, which gave me a glimmer of optimism. I wanted to think that they could change, that perhaps, just maybe, they were beginning to recognize their mistakes. When I graduated from college, my parents actually attended the ceremony. They smiled proudly as they snapped pictures with me. It seemed odd to have them there after all those years when they hadn't even acknowledged my achievements. Following the ceremony, my parents, Jackson, my grandma, and I went out to lunch to celebrate. It was one of the few times I felt like we were a family, even if it was just for a short period. For once, I wasn't invisible to them, and that simple act of recognition meant more to me than words could describe. This year, after securing my first true high-paying job and earning my first big salary, I wanted to do something special to commemorate the occasion. I thought, why not share this moment with my family? I hadn't spent much time with my parents growing up, So I wanted to surprise them with something meaningful, a cruise excursion. Only the three of us. There were no distractions or obligations, simply quality time together to compensate for what we had missed over the years. Deep down, I knew I desired their attention, even after all these years of feeling overlooked. As for Jackson, I intended to get him something nice later so he wouldn't feel excluded. I wanted the cruise trip to be a surprise for my parents, so instead of notifying them over the phone, I made a reservation at a fine, costly restaurant where we could eat and celebrate. When I called to invite my parents, they appeared excited, even thrilled, to visit the restaurant. They promised to be there on time. But, when I arrived at the restaurant on time, my parents were unable to be seen. At first, I attempted to give them the benefit of doubt. Perhaps they were stuck in traffic or running a little late. However, after around 15, 20, and 30 minutes, I began to feel worried. I contacted them several times, and they did not answer until the sixth call. My father casually remarked that they were finishing up some last-minute errands and will be at the restaurant soon. Annoyed but hopeful, I remained at the table, waiting for them. The waiter kept coming by, asking if the rest of my group had come, and I became increasingly humiliated with each passing minute. I didn't want to look like I'd been stood up in a fine restaurant. I eventually ordered dinner for myself since I was hungry. I finished my dinner while sitting alone, glancing at the empty seats across from me. My calls to my parents remained unanswered after that. An hour passed, followed by nearly 2 hours. Finally, after my 15th effort, my father answered the phone. He began apologizing, but I was completely irritated by this point. I started yelling at him, wondering what they had been doing all this time and why they couldn't just tell me they weren't going to make it. "Oh, just stop complaining," he replied dismissively. "I apologize for the delay. Your mother and I were held up at the shop. We selected the ideal birthday present for your brother, but when we got to the counter, we discovered your mother had forgotten her card at home. So we had to drive back and grab it. Fortunately, the shop had our gift, which we were able to purchase just now. Jackson is going to be overjoyed with what we picked out for him. By the way, have you purchased anything for your brother yet? You do recall that his birthday is in 2 weeks, right?" At that point, I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. I was hoping to have a memorable moment with my parents to celebrate my accomplishments and bring us closer together, but once again, Jackson was all that mattered to them. They had spent the entire evening shopping for his birthday gift, completely ignoring the fact that I had been sitting alone at the restaurant waiting for them. Not only had they missed the dinner, but they had the audacity to inquire whether I had thought to get something for Jackson. I was livid, but I tried to remain calm as I reminded my father that they could have bought for Jackson any other day. They should have respected my time, especially because I went out of my way to prepare this for them. My father's response made matters worse. He dismissed my concerns, claiming they were on their way and that we could discuss it once they arrived. However, I did not want to stay there any longer. I was furious with my parents. I paid my bill, got up from the table and went. My phone began to vibrate as I drove back home. My parents were phoning and left voicemails, stating they had arrived at the restaurant but couldn't find me. I ignored their calls because I was too angry and hurt to even consider talking to them. Later that night, my mother sent me a series of SMS. She attacked me rather than apologizing or admitting that they had made mistakes. She labeled me impolite for not being present when they finally arrived, as if I had wasted their time. She had the gall to claim that this was why they didn't care about my irrelevant intentions in the first place. I was always so impulsive. According to her, their priorities were totally acceptable, and I was in the wrong for being furious with them. Reading her messages brought up memories of hurt and fury. I had put my heart and soul into planning something spectacular, and all I received in return was the same indifference I had felt my entire life. I simply couldn't deal with their cruel statements and frequent disregard for my sentiments. After everything I had done to make this moment memorable, I felt much more alone than before. I knew that no matter what I did, Jackson would always come first, leaving me as an afterthought. I blocked her without bothering to respond. Update number 1. The reason I bought the cruise tickets in the first place was that my parents' conduct had changed significantly following my grandfather's death. I felt they'd finally recognized me as a human being and their child. But I suppose I was mistaken again. I am delighted my eyes are awake now. Starting today, I'm done begging and crying for their attention. I will block both of them on my phone. Regarding the update, it appears that my parents have informed Jackson of the entire situation, and he phoned me this week to address it. My brother believes that our parents' actions were not improper, and that I should have respected them enough to wait for their arrival rather than fleeing at the last minute. He added that our parents were quite disappointed in me and had contacted him to protest about my activities. He invited me to his forthcoming birthday party so I could apologize to our parents. I declined his request, asking him to leave me alone for the time being. He tried to argue with me more, but I reminded him that my connection with our parents had nothing to do with him, and that he would never comprehend what I was going through. Update number 2. It's been a month since I last updated. For those who inquired, I did consider canceling my cruise reservations. But then I realized I'd spent a big portion of my paycheck on them, so I resolved to make better use of them. I chose to travel with my best friend and grandmother rather than my parents. To put it simply, the three of us had a fantastic time, and I quickly forgot about all of my parents' trouble. This trip provided a much-needed break for all of us. However, after the trip, when I shared a few photos from our cruise, I began receiving messages from my father on Facebook, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful for taking grandma on the vacation without inviting them. I had forgotten to block my parents on Facebook because I assumed they rarely used it. My father's audacity to ask me to take him after everything he and mom had put me through was staggering. He also mentioned how upset my mother was when I blocked her, and how he wishes I would simply go to therapy and overcome my childish behavior, so I could stop torturing them for the rest of their life. Update number 3. Hello everyone, it has been 4 months since my previous update, and I am doing well. I've blocked both my parents and Jackson. I'll admit that since cutting them off, my life has become considerably more calm. I've learned to recognize that family isn't always what you're born into, it's what you choose. Surrounding yourself with supportive friends and loved ones has made a huge difference. My grandmother and I still have a terrific relationship, and I want to take her on additional vacations in the future. My sister-in-law requested a house key. I refused. Then it vanished. When I went to her apartment to get it, I encountered something shocking. I recently married my boyfriend of 6 years. We are both 27. While COVID has set our careers back a little, we are figuring it out together. My husband is not particularly close to his family. He never said why he isn't close to them, but based on what I've gathered, my husband and sister-in-law have some issues. These concerns compelled the in-laws to choose sides. My spouse hasn't been close to them since they sided with my sister-in-law. To be honest, it didn't disturb me too much. However, because I come from a large family, my spouse was frequently invited to our family gatherings because we had been together so long. Following these incidents, I noticed my spouse becoming silent, melancholy, and dejected. When we tried to talk about it, he never truly opened up. He just told me he wishes he had a better family. I recognized that he desired a closer or better relationship with his family. However, I didn't want to do anything without his approval. When I volunteered to contact his family on his behalf, he said he didn't want to do anything yet. He kept saying that there would be a better moment, but I had no idea when that would be. At one time, I was certain it would happen at our wedding. However, we married in a small ceremony attended by only our closest friends and family. He had not invited anyone from his side. However, I did meet his parents and my sister-in-law. While our wedding ceremony was going on, his parents and sister attempted to enter the site, which my husband had clearly cautioned them against. When they were successful in entering the premises, they made a big deal out of it, casting my husband as the bad guy for never responding to messages, picking up calls, or visiting my mother-in-law when she was battling cancer. My husband firmly instructed them to leave, indicating they were not welcome. My sister-in-law stood in the corner, watching everything happen. When her eyes met mine, she offered me a little shrug, as if to say, "What else are we supposed to do?" Once they were booted out, the wedding went off without a hitch. Following that, we were content to get married despite the odds. When we were on our way to our honeymoon, I received a friend request notification on my phone. It came from my sister-in-law. It seemed odd, but I didn't mind because we were family. I added her, then forgot about it. When we returned from our honeymoon, my husband and I were joyfully settling into our new home and married life. That's when my sister-in-law returned to my life. She messaged me, stating she knew I came from a large family and understood the value of family, which she claimed my husband did not. She expressed her gratitude for my assistance in reuniting the family. She also discussed in detail how my husband could be a bit juvenile, but promised me that if we worked together, we would be able to fix everything quickly. I was naive and believed her. We began talking more or less regularly. She even came over to our house once or twice while my husband was away because she wanted to meet me. Because I worked from home and had health difficulties, I couldn't entirely avoid her. During one of these visits, my sister-in-law requested a copy of the keys to our house. This was an odd request. When I questioned why she wanted them, she stated she was concerned about me because I was at home all day working. She stated that if something occurred to me while my husband was gone, Having a key would allow her to enter and assist me. Although I understood her argument in the context of a medical emergency, something about her request seemed odd. Her statements made me feel uneasy, but I couldn't understand why. I gently declined and promised her that if anything happened, I'd call my husband. However, my sister-in-law did not appear pleased with my refusal. She quickly ended the conversation and departed. Although she was smiling, it didn't reach her eyes, which worried me even more. Following the incident, I stopped inviting her over. Every time she wanted to visit, I would make excuses to keep her away from the house. But one day, my justifications were ineffective, and she came over anyhow. I was on high alert the entire time she was present. When she eventually departed after lingering for tea, I felt relieved, but not for long. A few days later, I couldn't find my house keys in the customary location. Panic ensued instantly. I decided to go to my sister-in-law's apartment to get them. In one of our early talks, she provided her address and invited me to tea. I couldn't go since I was ill, but I knew the spot. As soon as my husband arrived home, I jumped into my car and drove to her place. I knocked on the door, and a man answered. I inquired if I might talk with my sister-in-law. The man respectfully informed me that nobody by her name lived there. I stated that she had given me this address and even showed him her picture. He glanced at it and stated that my sister-in-law did not live there and that I must have entered the wrong address. This seemed really suspicious. I casually messaged her and asked for her address again. She replied with the same address as before. By this point, I was absolutely panicked. I arrived home, trying to act normal, but I could tell I was nervous. My husband realized right away that something was awry. He has been trying to ask me what is wrong and what has happened for the past 2 days, but I have no idea how to explain the issue to him. I don't want him to be disappointed in me, but I realize I should inform him. I kept wondering if it was my fault for initiating the entire conversation with my sister-in-law. If I hadn't done it, I would not have lost the keys in this manner. But I really wanted to help. I know I should inform my husband about the entire scenario. I read what you stated, and I agree that I was terribly stupid to keep things from him. I should have told him about it, anyhow. I understand why some of you are dubbing me the evil guy in this circumstance, and I also understand those who believe I am not fully to blame. Whatever happens, I'll do the right thing tonight and tell him everything. Do not fear, I will keep you updated. Regardless, I appreciate you being sincere and pointing out my mistakes. So the conversation went better than anticipated. When my husband arrived home from work, I told him I had something to discuss with him. He appeared relieved. When we were both comfortable, I told him everything. I described how his sister-in-law messaged me after our honeymoon, telling me that I could mend the family by remaining in touch with her and gradually reintroducing her and his parents into his life. I told him I didn't mean to hide anything or go against him, but I was afraid he'd stop me from doing anything. Since he was always refusing to tell me what was wrong with his family, I decided to try to heal the relationship myself. He listened to what I said without interrupting. When I was finished, my husband expressed his disappointment in me for keeping this from him for so long. He claimed I should have asked him what the problem was, and he would have told me everything now that we're married. He added that he didn't feel comfortable informing me before we got married since he didn't know when his family would try to turn my heart against him. When I told him I couldn't follow, he gave me all the facts. My father-in-law is a very egotistical and abusive man. He has always been like this, caring just about himself. My sister-in-law acquired this feature from him. She is a narcissistic yet charming lady who appears to be a very empathetic and sincere human being. However, in truth, she is selfish. My husband became aware of the hazardous atmosphere as soon as he matured enough to notice it. My mother-in-law and father-in-law both refused to divorce one another because they did not want to go through the inconvenience of court proceedings. When my sister-in-law's behavior got her into trouble at school, my mother-in-law exacerbated the situation by enabling her. Over time, my sister-in-law became more confrontational, harsh, and disrespectful. When she started college, she had a heated dispute with my mother-in-law and father-in-law. They were paying for her college tuition, but she was dissatisfied since they were also saving money for my husband's schooling rather than giving it all to her as pocket money. At first, my father-in-law and mother-in-law refused to give my sister-in-law any more money because she already had plenty. But then my sister-in-law pointed out that my husband could just work his way through university, as my father-in-law had done, especially since he was a guy. She said that she was far too fragile to perform such work alone. Following that, my husband's education fund began to diminish. He was not aware of this. All he knew was that there was money set aside for him. When it came time for admissions, he learned the truth. When my sister-in-law encouraged him to just work his way through college, my husband chose to avoid touch with them. He began going no contact when he moved out at 19, but the decision had become permanent by the time he was 23. Hearing all of this made me realize how silly I was to invite my sister-in-law into our home. My husband also said that his mother had repeatedly contacted him over the years to ask for money, despite the fact that my sister-in-law appeared to be wealthy. Later, he discovered from their relative that my sister-in-law was doing drugs. While she did not appear to have a drug problem, she had struggled with substance misuse for some time. That's when I realized what had happened with the lost keys. My spouse quickly instructed me to call a locksmith and have the locks changed as soon as possible. He was concerned about when or if my sister-in-law will try to enter our home. I immediately disabled my sister-in-law's contact information and social media sites, preventing her from contacting me. We had the locks replaced, and as I said in my previous report, I felt a lot better after that. As my job responsibilities changed, I had to return to the office to work on Wednesdays and Fridays. When I got home one Friday, I noticed that my spouse had already arrived. It turns out that our neighbor, a nice old lady, was outdoors in her garden when she observed a suspicious young woman attempting to enter our home. The woman's description was exactly like my sister-in-law. The neighbor phoned the cops, and they apprehended her. My husband has decided not to prosecute charges, but he will apply for a restraining order to safeguard our safety. Looking back, I understand how naive I was in trusting others so easily. While my objective was to aid my husband, I now realize that my actions were presumptuous. If you care so much about your husband's well-being, why don't you tell him everything rather than keeping things from him? I'm sure it would upset him more to find that you were keeping things from him than to learn that you were talking to his sister. AITA, in the wrong, but only for being arrogant. You are purposefully ignoring your husband's demands in order to accomplish your own, and you are keeping everything from him. He does not wish to communicate with his family. Why can't you respect that? Now, consider a different situation. In late October, my wife Karen, 78 years old, and I, 71 years old, leave for Florida and spend the summer in Connecticut. Our daughter Kara and her husband Sean live in Massachusetts. Kara is pregnant with their first child, who is due in March. In September, my stepson gave Kara and Sean new kitchen floors. I offered to help with the installation. Their home is nearly a century old. While I am not a contractor or carpenter, I am proficient in home repairs. I was simply intended to lay the floors, but during the demolition, I persuaded them to remove several cabinets so that the flooring could be installed properly. I agreed to help with prep work on weekends and returned from Florida in November to build and install the new cabinets. They agreed. Kara and Sean, as new homeowners, are not particularly handy, but they were eager to get started. However, as we started, we discovered that the walls were covered with decomposing horsehair plaster, which was an unpleasant surprise. By the conclusion of the weekend, there was no stove hookup, only 10% of the floors had been put, and the kitchen was disorganized. I told them to plaster the walls throughout the week, and I'd return the next weekend. Kara and Sean contacted in a panic on Tuesday, claiming the plaster was a catastrophe. Kara expressed worried about the burden of her pregnancy. I told them to wait. Kara, on the other hand, told me she felt misled, that the project had spiraled out of control, and that she wanted me to accept responsibility, not monetarily, but for my role in the issues. I informed them that they had taken the decision to demo the cabinets, and that it was not my home. They eventually compensated me for my services and hired a contractor. They stated I couldn't commit to a project of this scale, especially given I work full-time and assist my stepson with his house flip. They questioned whether I would return to assist after departing for Florida, and Kara was uneasy working during her pregnancy. I disagreed with their evaluation yet was devastated when they fired me. Since then, things have gotten odd. I haven't contacted them to inquire about the kitchen or the baby, despite receiving occasional updates. Karen has asked about the baby several times. Kara recently contacted us, stating that the situation has been dreadful. They had to obtain licenses from the town, and they have not had a stove or sink in months. Kara claims I don't care about her health or our grandchild since I haven't checked in and haven't taken charge of the situation. I chuckled and told her I would have finished it by now. She texted Karen and myself, instructing us not to speak to her and expressing her displeasure. Karen then said no to Kara's baby shower in January and canceled our visit without alerting them. Sean contacted us, urging us to reconsider, stating that they will only become first-time parents once. He added that Kara is 6.5 months pregnant and did not mean what she said. He even offered to pay for our visit tickets. Karen and I, on the other hand, have maintained our solid attitude. We advised them to notify us well in advance, and that we may visit in March, either before or after the baby is delivered. Kara is devastated, but Karen and I were just trying to satisfy her requests. Now I wonder whether I am the YTA on so many ways. First, as you mentioned, you are neither a contractor or carpenter but are skilled at house maintenance. You urged them to demolish their kitchen but barely completed 10% of the flooring before leaving. Kara has every right to be upset, and her feelings are valid. You made a mess of their place and then backed down, essentially saying, "Oh well, not my issue. I personally would not want anything to do with you, but they have invited you to their baby shower. Go and apologize." Now, consider a different situation. I have 3 children. My husband and I worked hard to raise them and help them become successful adults, and they have. I am proud of all 3. They were wonderful children who have grown into decent individuals, if I do say so myself. When my oldest daughter married a widower with a 2-year-old child, my husband and I established an education fund for that child, as we had for all of our biological grandchildren. We understand a little bit about investing in compound interest, and by starting early, we can invest a small sum every month. By the time they graduate from high school, we can present them with enough money to get them started in life. My oldest grandchild recently graduated from high school. After accounting for scholarships and other expenses, we were able to inform them that they would graduate debt-free. We do not give them money directly, rather, we pay for tuition, fees, and other expenditures. We acquired this lesson from our youngest child, our only son. We gave him the money directly, just as we had done with his 2 elder sisters. He got scholarships as well, but he spent the money we gave him and eventually decided to become a tradesperson instead. He is doing well now and has a great business. My son was married before, but it did not work out. He has 2 children from that marriage. Last year, he married a lovely woman who had a 15-year-old kid. She had her son quite early, which caused a schism in her family, and none of them attended the wedding. My son approached us about donating to his stepson's education. After some deliberation, my husband and I decided that we could afford to donate $5,000 to help, but that was it. My son was quite disappointed. He understands that all of our other grandchildren have enough money in their accounts to cover at least 2.5 years of in-state tuition and costs. While my son makes a fair living, he also enjoys spending it on toys and holidays. I don't believe he or my daughter-in-law had saved anything for his stepson's school, which is why we contributed $5,000. That money came from my personal fund to replace my car. My son and his wife are planning ahead for the stepson's graduation in June, but they continue to complain that I treat him differently than my other grandchildren. I understand we're treating him differently, but we didn't have nearly 2 decades to save for him. When I clarified this issue, I may not have worded it correctly. My son's lack of finances to pay for his stepson's schooling is due to his spending habits before marriage. I hope this is apparent now. I spoke with my husband and children about it. My son wants me to transfer money from all of the accounts we've set up for his biological children and open a new one for his stepson. We answered by offering to split the 2 accounts we already had for his biological children into 3, including the $5,000. We also agreed to continue contributing to these accounts until they are depleted. My youngster appears dissatisfied with that option. However, we did not have the same 15-year head start on saving for this grandson as we did for the previous ones. He can be disappointed that his stepson will not have the same head start, but he cannot be angry with us for not being able to offer more right now. Finally, it is up to him to provide for his family. For my 19th birthday, my grandparents gifted me a dream trip, but my parents made me give it to my sister, who then caused an accident en route. My 19th birthday was 2 weeks ago, and I'm still reeling from what happened. My grandparents, bless their hearts, gifted me a trip to Rome, complete with plane tickets and a substantial expense check. They handed me a beautiful envelope with the tickets, and I almost burst into tears. Rome, the place I had wanted to visit since I was a child, was finally within reach. But then my folks stepped in. They decided the trip would be more appropriate for my older sister, Amelia. She's 23, the golden child who can't do anything wrong. Apparently, since she is studying architecture, Rome would be an excellent opportunity for her to visit all of the famous buildings. I tried to reason with them. I plan to major in history, and Rome is historically significant. Furthermore, Amelia had the same opportunity when she turned 18. My grandparents had given her the same trip, but she accepted the money instead. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't going to give up. But the airline won't let us transfer the tickets, I told them. It's against their policy. My parents dismissed it as a small annoyance that might be easily resolved. Don't worry about that, Anna, they said. We'll figure it out. Figure it out ended up wearing me down. The disputes lasted for days. They began with, Amelia needs this for her resume, then moved on to you have plenty of time to travel later, and eventually nailed me with, We don't want this opportunity to go to waste. That last one hurt, as if they were implying I wouldn't enjoy it as much as Amelia would. I eventually broke down. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't take the struggle any longer. I told them they could do whatever they pleased with the tickets. At least I still had my check, which was a tiny consolation. I was used to being the less popular child. It came with benefits such as low expectations and a good dose of cynicism. But here's the kicker. They were able to get the ticket moved. I'm not sure how, given that the airline's policy was rather clear, but they did. Amelia grabbed my boarding pass yesterday, the day I was due to fly to Rome. A few hours later, we received a call from the police. Amelia had been in an accident on her way to the airport. She had grabbed the taxi driver's steering wheel, believing he was driving the wrong way. Yeah, she assumed she understood more than the person who drives for a living. The automobile crashed. Amelia escaped with a few scratches, but the cab driver was not so fortunate. He ended up with a fractured arm and a nasty gash on his forehead while pressing charges. My folks were freaking out. They would have to use their funds to settle with the driver and keep Amelia out of court. When I learned the news, I snapped. "This is karma," I blurted. "This is what you get for stealing my trip." It wasn't the most sensitive thing to say, but I hadn't been thinking straight. My folks were horrified. "Anna, how could you say that? Your sister could have been killed." I tried to apologize, but the harm was already done. They accused me of being selfish and inconsiderate, along with other common allegations. It was infuriating. They were the selfish ones, taking my ideal trip to cater to Amelia. That's when I realized, why was I putting up with this? Why was I sacrificing my happiness for a family who did not appreciate me? Screw it, I thought. If they're going to dislike me, I might as well give them a valid cause. I got a taxi and went to the hospital. On the way, I made a decision. I would not let them win. I had my grandparents' check, my passport, and a strong desire to take charge of my life. At the hospital, I discovered my parents and Amelia on the same floor as the injured taxi driver. Amelia was still trying to convince the cops that the accident was not her fault. I didn't care. I walked up to her and requested the boarding permit. She looked at me as if I was insane, so I reached into her purse and took it myself. Then I ran. As if a band of wolves were chasing me. I rushed into a cab and instructed the driver to take me to the airport. I made it barely in time. I boarded the plane, heart racing, and did not look back. I did not check my phone till I arrived in Rome. My family was losing their minds, as one could imagine. My parents left a series of messages calling me every name in the book. They claimed I was callous, that I should have been there for Amelia, and that I was a shame to the family. Amelia sent even harsher messages. She accused me of stealing her trip, being envious, and destroying her life. Apparently, my parents were going to have to spend all of their savings to pay off the taxi driver, and it was all my fault. Yeah, right, as if it wasn't her fault to seize the steering wheel in the first place. The shame gnawed at me for a while. Perhaps I should have remained. Perhaps I should have apologized. But then I remembered all those years of being disregarded and treated as second best. I remember how they looked at me when they said they didn't want the vacation to be a waste. I deserved it. I deserved to do something for myself, to prioritize my needs. And Rome? It exceeded all of my expectations. The history, the art, the food, it was all magical. I spent my days exploring ancient ruins, admiring artworks, and eating my weight in spaghetti. I felt completely free for the first time in my life. I wasn't Anna, the overlooked daughter. I was just Anna, and it felt great. After a few wonderful days in Rome, I finally mustered the confidence to phone my grandparents. I told them everything, years of favoritism, disputes about the trip, the accident, and the escape. I poured out my emotions, tears flowing down my cheeks. They were stunned. They had no idea how horribly my parents had mistreated me. They were angry, upset, and, above all, concerned. My grandmother said, "Anna, you did the right thing." Her voice full with emotion. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved." They invited me to come live with them when I returned. They assured me that they would take care of me and that I did not need to worry about anything. For the first time in my life, I felt really seen and understood. When I returned from Rome, I went directly to their residence. They had already moved all of my belongings out of my parents' home. The guest room was ready for me, with clean linens and a vase of my favorite flowers on the nightstand. It felt like coming home. My grandparents told me that they had challenged my parents. They had put it all out and expressed their disappointment with their behavior. My parents, unsurprisingly, disputed everything. They claimed I was exaggerating, and that I was simply jealous of Amelia. They even had the audacity to claim I was selfish for abandoning them amid a family crisis. But my grandparents saw straight through them. They severed relations with my parents and stated that they had no more desire to interact with them. It was a terrible decision, but they knew it was the correct one. I haven't communicated with my parents or Amelia since. I blocked their phone numbers and removed their texts. I don't need that much negativity in my life. Life with my grandparents is calm. They treat me with love and respect. They urge me to follow my aspirations. They make me feel like I belong. I'm entering college in the fall, and my grandparents are covering all of my expenses, including tuition, books, and a new laptop. They claim they want to give me the possibilities I've been denied for so long. I still think about my parents. I wonder whether they regret what they did and if they ever think about me. But then I remember the freedom and love I now have in my life, and I realize I made the correct decision. I'm finally free. Free of expectations, comparisons, and the continual sense of not being good enough. I'm free to be myself and pursue my own path, which I understand is the best gift of all. It has been a couple years since I left my parents' place. I'm thriving in college, making new friends and pursuing new interests. My grandparents are my rock and biggest supports. They're getting older, yet they're still full of energy and love. I heard through the grapevine that my folks are struggling. They had to remortgage their home to pay for the taxi driver's lawsuit. Amelia is working, but her salary is insufficient to cover their expenses. They are caught in a cycle of debt and resentment. I do not feel sorry for them. They made their decisions, and now they must live with the consequences. I'm moving forward. I'm embracing my new life and family. I'm finally living the life I was destined to live, and it's stunning. My ex-girlfriend opened up 2 credit cards in my name after we broke up. She ran up about $7,500 in debt, and her current boyfriend is now threatening me. Original post. My ex and I broke up a little more than a year ago. We lived together for a couple of years and I know she would have had access to my financial information. When we broke up, I moved out of the house we were renting and I thought I had everything of mine. Back in February when I was doing my taxes, I realized I could not find my folder with my previous year's tax returns anywhere. I assumed it got lost in the move and didn't think anything else of it. Last Friday, I got served for a lawsuit to the tune of over $5,000 for a defaulted credit card. When I went and actually pulled my credit, I saw that card had been defaulted since May and there was another one which had been closed since June for about $2,500. Seeing as I had no knowledge about this, I immediately disputed both of the accounts on all 3 bureaus' websites. I was able to talk with someone for one of the cards and they said it was opened in January, well after I had moved out of my old house, and the cards were sent there. I received the statements from the one card and it was probably 80% Nordstrom Macy's, 2 of the stores my ex loved shopping at. Pretty sure she was the one who opened the accounts, probably used my social security number from the old tax returns. I called my ex about it and she denied everything, even when I told her that eventually, if she had anything shipped to the house using a stolen credit card, she's going to get found out. She flipped and started screaming at me saying I can't seriously accuse her of anything and to never talk to her again. About 20 minutes later I get a call from a blocked number. It was her boyfriend threatening to make my life a living hell unless I stopped harassing her by claiming she stole my identity. He hung up but I was shaken up about it. I can see he's got some serious felonies just by looking at the public records on the county website. I'm kind of stuck here. I'm opening myself up to retaliation if I go forward with anything from someone who has charges of aggravated arson and aggravated discharge of a firearm, in addition to a few battery charges. I can't just not do anything though. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Relevant comments. Commenter. Copying this for every identity theft situation I see on here, since it seems to happen a lot, where you know who the person is who stole your identity. This is all information you can find in this sub and others. 1. Call the police. You're the victim of identity theft, plain and simple. It doesn't matter who did it or what your relationship is to them. They broke the law, now they have to face the consequences of their actions. 2. Freeze your credit. You want to make sure it doesn't happen again, take the proactive route of freezing your credit. 3. Monitor and track your credit. You need to be alerted if anyone tries opening a line of credit in your name. This gives you a way to do it for free and it shows your credit score. 4. Warn anyone else who might be a victim. This includes family members or anyone else whose social security number might be compromised by the thief. 5. Take the police report to the credit bureaus. Give them the report number when you dispute all of the accounts. Most of the time, that will be enough for them to take the accounts off of your credit. It's on the creditors themselves to prove the accounts are legitimately yours, and the bureaus aren't going to get in the middle of it. A police report goes a long way in clearing up your credit. Don't take identity theft lying down, even if it's someone close to you. If you let them get away with it, get ready for 5-10 years of bad credit, collection agencies coming after you, lawsuits, etc. For this specific case, you need to go to the police like now. This guy seems like an incredibly violent person. I would get a restraining order as soon as possible. Does he know where you live? I also would not contact your ex at all about anything else. Let it all go through the court system. OOP. I plan on calling the police. I was just kind of freaked out about the whole situation. How do I get the police report to the credit companies? Commenter 2. File a police report for the fraud. Contact the lenders and provide the police report number and jurisdiction. Let the police bank sort it out. Provide all that info to the lawyers that filed the suit and bring it all to court. Do not skip a court date. Update. I followed the advice in the comments and went to the police. Quick and painless process. I was in and out in maybe 30 minutes with a report number. I never received another call from my ex or her BF. I gave the report number to the credit card companies and the credit bureaus. I was told I didn't have to do anything else at that point but to show up to the court date for the lawsuit. I learned through a mutual friend today that my ex was arrested this morning. Apparently the county put out a warrant for her last week, pulled her over on the way to work. It looks like she was charged and released pretty quickly. Also, I learned my ex and the BF who threatened me are no longer together. I don't think I have to worry about him anymore. The court date for the lawsuit is later this month, but everything has already fallen off my report. My score has gone up probably 200 points. I'm still going to the court date just to make sure everything is good, but it's looking like all good news from here on out. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. That's awesome news. Your story will also serve as inspiration for others to pursue justice when they've been wronged. Commenter 2. Make sure you put a freeze on your SSN with all 3 credit bureaus, if you haven't done so already. Left my fiancée due to her abusive family. Weeks later, she's gone forever. I uncovered affairs and lies that shattered our entire friend group. I've been dating my fiancée for 4 years and engaged for 7 months. We were trying to arrange our wedding for the fall of next year. To put it plainly, her childhood was horrific. Her parents were raving narcissists, and she became the scapegoat for her 2 brothers. She was abused and expelled the moment she turned 18. However, she was an excellent student and a diligent worker. With several scholarships and part-time work, she established a successful profession and became self-sufficient. The trouble, however, was that she maintained communication with her family. None of them have changed. In fact, they have grown more financially reliant on her. They gradually re-entered her life, emotionally blackmailing her for support. They're not happy about it either. They're rude, condescending, and generally enjoy being a nuisance, but my fiancée can't say no, no matter what terrible things they say or how blatantly they try to intimidate her. I've always been aware of her family history and have supported her in dealing with it. However, during the last year, they've grown significantly more aggressive and disruptive. They are becoming increasingly frequent visitors to our home, leaving messes everywhere. Her mother behaves like Cinderella's stepmother. Her father consumes all of my beer and depletes half of the refrigerator, and her brothers pay visits sometimes, serving as mouthpieces for their parents. They practically trashed the place and left us to clean it up. Meanwhile, my fiancée is standing quietly in the corner, virtually shivering. I'm no fool. I understand the legitimate trauma and her desire to feel loved by them. She hopes they will eventually appreciate her. In case you were wondering, she has been in therapy for years to address this. For over 2 years, I've attempted to set boundaries and push these people away, but this is her house. She bought it. And no matter what my financial or emotional contributions are, she won't let me have a say in who comes over. She recently informed me that she wants to gain their acceptance, that they were correct about her, and that she must improve for their sake. We've had several emotional chats, full of tears and begging, in the hopes that she'll take action to improve. However, she is an adult, and I cannot force her to do anything. I love her, but I can't help but be resentful of what she's doing. It's heartbreaking to see someone you care about, who deserves so much better, blatantly ruin themselves for individuals like her family. I've tried numerous times to help her escape their grasp, but I have to think of our future. What happens when we have children? What happens if she is postpartum and invites them over? What if there is a medical emergency or our funds are short and they continue to demand money? This is the in-law family from hell, and I'll be unable to avoid them. Tomorrow, I'll inform her that I want to postpone the wedding until definite boundaries are created. If she resents it, I will leave. I can't take it any longer. I refuse to see this creeping devastation. Update. I spoke with her and everything went as expected. I'm now staying in a motel for a few days while planning my long-term move. There's still a lot going on right now, but perhaps by next week I'll be able to compile everything into a single update. Update 1. The night after I posted the first post, I decided to have a conversation with my fiancée regarding her family. However, she returned from work early the next day, and as I was already off that day, I started the conversation earlier than I had intended. Essentially, I warned her that this arrangement was unsustainable. I did not feel comfortable marrying her because of how involved her family is in her life, and I certainly did not feel good bringing a child into the world with them present. I didn't want to advise her to break off communication with them totally, but I did ask for strong restrictions on when they could come over and what they could do around the home. I also requested couples treatment before getting married. She was not pleased. She simply stared at me fiercely as I spoke, then began shrieking after I finished. She said I didn't understand their relationship, but it worked for her. I told her they were abusive users who would bleed her dry, and I had never seen them treat her with kindness. She reacted by claiming she simply needed to work harder for people to appreciate her. I basically yelled back that a child shouldn't have to beg, plead, or work to be loved by their parents. Finally, I informed her that either she established limits for them or I'd walk. She was furious, and as I was living in her home, I was booted out. I've been staying at a hotel for the past few days and my belongings have been taken out and stored. Frankly, it's been fantastic. I want to spend a few weeks with my family around mid-July before commencing house shopping on my own. I've spent the last few days relaxing, catching up on movies and video games that I hadn't had time for, and returning home to a peaceful room without her family tearing it apart. Things finally came to a head yesterday. We've had almost no contact since she kicked me out, but I know her family loves to spend the afternoon at her house every Saturday, and she generally uses me as a shield from their abuse. In a pretty selfish action, I simply left my phone muted all day and listened *Disco Elysium*. I knew she'd call for help with her family, but at this point sheer hatred had set in, and I didn't want to deal with her concerns. By the end of the night, she'd texted me over a dozen times and left 2 desperate voicemails urging me to come home. I decided to go over and check on her. Long story short, she was sobbing in the living room, and when I approached her, she literally crushed my back, clinging and crying. I waited for her to calm down before asking what had happened. Apparently, her mom and brother stopped by to demand money and utter awful things to her. She asked me to come help, but I had been ignoring her. When she sought to get assistance from one of her pals, everyone essentially said no. That's when it all clicked for her, and she eventually kicked her family out. But not before they said some truly terrible things to her, which I will not repeat. She repeatedly apologized to me and told me to come home. I told her openly that I had been harboring strong feelings of anger toward her for some years, and that while I loved her and knew that it was trauma rather than her being outright abusive, there were huge issues that needed to be addressed before we could move forward. First, she sells the house and relocates. We make nearly the same amount of money and plan to buy a property together. I am an adult man, and I will not live in a home where I have no equal agency. Second, her relatives will never enter it. They will never come over, and if they do, I will treat them in a hostile manner. Third, she sees a new therapist and we begin premarital counseling. Fourth, she never forced me to interact with her relatives again. Fifth, we will maintain little communication with her family for the time being, but make no mistake. We are moving toward complete no contact from her end. I told her that I loved her. We've been together for a long time and have wonderful memories, and I know she's been abused. But these conditions cannot be changed. If she has a problem with any of them, we will have to part ways. She informed me she's known for a while that her family is poisonous and unhealthy, and she wants to make changes, but some of them will take time to manifest. For the time being, I plan to stay in the hotel till I return to see my family. She is welcome to come over, but I have made it obvious that her home is not a place I want to be. We both have the day off tomorrow, so we'll spend it here and maybe go out. This is definitely not over yet. But I may not publish again until mid-August or so. Update 2. Despite my best intentions to not update until much later, with the hopes of improving my relationship with my fiancée and her establishing boundaries with her toxic family. We have now split up. Essentially what occurred was that after last weekend, when I left her to deal with her family on her own, she appeared to fully understand the issue and was open to adjustments, including limits and a possible transfer. We spent Monday and Tuesday hanging out at my hotel before I returned to my family for a few weeks. She was scheduled to come over the previous night, but her texts were pretty ambiguous. She arrived considerably later than usual, and I sensed something was wrong. She basically went off on me, calling me abusive, overbearing, extremely demanding and unsupportive. It took me 5 seconds to realize she was reciting a planned speech from her parents. To be honest, I was so irritated at this point that, despite taking a tremendous risk on her, I chose to be a jerk about it. I questioned if her relatives had told her to say this. She said they proposed it, although she came up with it herself. Sure. I requested her to explain in detail what I had done wrong. She stated I was parasitic on her. I reminded her that I was paying 50/50ths for her mortgage, electricity and groceries, and that I own and pay for my own car, as well as a job that pays the same as hers. Unlike her parasitic parents, who demand cash every week and loot the kitchen on weekends. I advised her to try again with something better. She appeared flustered and said I was attempting to isolate her. I smirked and informed her that I had always supported her many friendships, which she ended on her own since no one wanted to deal with her family or be used as a shield like me. At this point, I was nearly demanding to know why she was so determined to wreck her life for these individuals. She simply shouted that I don't understand her family and that she's just trying to reclaim their affection, and she was really ranting at that point. It's really incredible to see up close. I went to a few subreddits to get perspectives, and if you're familiar with them, you'll see how people who have been abused by their own family can be so completely broken that it wrecks their brain to the point where they believe they are the problem and deserve the abuse. That was exactly how she was. Completely shattered and unable to accept help. She didn't want to improve. She only wanted to get worse. The knowledge hit me hard, like a truck. I felt like a fool for attempting, even though it was what I was supposed to do in the first place. She was virtually insane by this point, and I was simply mentally weary and needed her to go before the cops arrived. She eventually went, but a few concerned neighbors checked on me. Some of her friends are aware, as they have messaged me to inquire about the situation. I told them the truth. I needed to be alone to think about what to do next. They have now revealed that she has delivered similar rants in response to their concern for her. One had even heard that she could lose her job. She is certainly taking a mental break from my understanding. She is now fully alone, plunging into a miserable, lonely existence. There's nothing I can do for her at this point, and as selfish as it may sound, I'm simply relieved it's over. Update 3. Things had mostly been wrapped up, but there remained a few loose ends. I absolutely failed to change my mailing address, which I should have done right away, so a few crucial things were delivered to her residence. I had to go get them, as well as a few other items I had left behind that I had decided I wanted to keep. She was being difficult and did not answer messages about them, so I had to go retrieve them myself. I had brought a common acquaintance just in case. Fortunately, she was cooperative in allowing me to retrieve my belongings, which was not a big deal. Everything else was another story. She said a lot of unpleasant things to me, including how she was already sleeping around, how pleased she was that I was gone, and how she was finally free from me. She said she'd be so much better off without me. All typical insults and dreadful things you'd expect from a bad breakup. You know what? It was clear that it was a scripted script from her family, and you could tell she was miserable. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The house was a mess. She wasn't even yelling. She sounded drained and broken as she said it. She didn't even smile as she spoke. Her face was distorted with hatred and wrath. She wasn't the lady I knew anymore. That individual was gone. When I was about to leave, she was still going on. I got fed up and told her something like, "Congratulations, your friends are gone, your human shields are gone, your engagement is over, and your support is gone. Anyone who has ever treated you with dignity is no longer alive. It's only you and your family. I hope you're content while they bleed you dry." It most likely did not go precisely as described, but something similar. She simply stood there, stared at me indifferently, and walked away as I walked out the door. Tiffany, a common friend, inquired about my well-being as we were leaving. I reassured her that I was and explained that I was only preparing to return home next week. She also confirmed that she had heard that my ex had been fired for failing to show up for work for several days and effectively disappearing. They're going to try an intervention next week and have asked if I can participate, but I'm not postponing my trip because frankly, I just want a clean break. I know that if I continue involved, I will only see a steady decline into either a complete breakdown or suicide. I simply cannot do that. Despite this, I'm excited about the future. I realized I overlooked far too many red signs in the beginning. Despite all that has transpired, I am confident that I will do well. I expect this to be my final update. I'm still in town till Sunday afternoon, so something may happen while I'm here, but it won't be exciting. Update 4. I'm currently in my home state visiting family, reacquainting myself with the place. I've decided to stay here permanently and have begun the long process of looking for properties in the region. I've been doing well, going out with friends and family. A handful of mutual friends with my ex-fiancée have told me what's been going on, and things appear to be improving. The intervention was supposed to take place on Sunday, but Saturday night after her family paid her another visit, she called pals in a fit of mania. It appears that she has now realized how horribly she screwed up. It was a full-blown panic episode and meltdown that landed her in the emergency room. Needless to say, she finally admits how miserable she is and how horribly she has messed up her life. Apparently, she attempted to phone me, but I had blocked her. She still has a job, and the information about her losing it was incorrect, but she is hanging by a thread there. Her supervisor has effectively told her to take a few weeks off work to clear her mind. Her friend circle is quite close. My ex was a really helpful and supportive friend, so it's understandable that her friends are going to such lengths to aid her. However, there is an implicit agreement that if she returns to her old ways, they will all allow her to sink on her own. She's doing as well as can be expected, however her family has continued to bother her with phone calls and messages. They attempted to visit her residence but were strongly redirected by friends and neighbors. I hope she understands the type of support system she has. As trashy as family arguments generally are, her parents and brothers have taken it to Facebook, which, according to what I've heard, has worked to my ex's advantage. It has exposed their behavior to a larger audience and appears to have silenced them for a short time. Finally, she had one of our common friends deliver a note to me. Essentially, she was confessing that all of the horrific things she said to me were lies and that her family had pressured her to say them, which I had known all along. She apologized for how things ended and hoped we could reconnect someday. Unfortunately, I had to explain that we needed to stay apart for good and that she should focus on her recuperation. I informed her that while I still care for her and wish her the best, this was our final goodbye. The message appears to have been sent and her friends are assisting her in processing it. She has a long way to go, but I hope she finds peace as I do. Comments. OOP regarding the ex's parents' opinions. OOP, they simply tried to play the "your daughter is ungrateful and cruel" card with close friends and family, only for a slew of people to call them out on their actions. Take this with a grain of salt, as it is unsubstantiated, but according to one source, in retribution, people began phoning one of the brothers' workplaces and leaving critical reviews on their Facebook page, airing all of the dirty laundry. It's not going well for him, although this is unconfirmed. Top comment. Her parents and brothers have escalated their family feud on Facebook. There were no falsehoods discovered. I applaud OOP for avoiding that disaster as much as possible. It's much better for this woman if she understands that her decisions have real repercussions, and if she doesn't want such consequences in the future, she needs to perform serious self-improvement. Update 5. I've been doing pretty well since I returned home. All of my belongings arrived safely, and I am now living with my family while I look for a new home. I've set up my employment here and have been back at work for the past week. I occasionally come here to comment and post, but that is all. Unfortunately, despite the best intentions of my ex's friends, the scenario has now ended in the worst possible way, and the friend group has been fractured as a consequence. My ex took her own life. Almost everything I'm about to say I learned last night. Since I left, her friends had been assisting her in getting back on her feet, encouraging her to seek better therapy, establishing boundaries with her family, and getting her out of the house. They definitely went above and above. Tiffany, the friend who was there to help me the last time I spoke face-to-face with my ex, became suspicious when she noticed my ex being touchy-feely with her boyfriend Daniel, while they were hanging out at her place. I don't sure exactly when things progressed, but Tiffany ultimately got hold of her boyfriend's phone when he was sleeping and discovered highly sexual messages between him and my ex. These texts were more than 5 months old, which surprised me greatly. Tiffany clearly lost it and informed everyone. Nobody could have predicted the drama that unfolded. Daniel, Tiffany's now ex threw another member of the friend group, Joseph, under the bus, alleging he had covered for him. Joseph's girlfriend in turn dumped him and kicked him out of her home. A friend group of about 9 people, including my ex, nearly imploded. Tiffany and Joseph's ex are the only ones that continue to communicate. Mind you, when I was being told all of this, I was informed that, despite the fact that I had been gone for almost a month, everything had occurred within the first week of my absence. My ex immediately lost her entire support system and was accused of everything. This simply exacerbated her already deteriorating mental health. Of course, everyone was curious as to why she had done such things to one of her closest friends. She simply stated that they had become close and that he was a terrific support system for her. Of course, she'd told her family about him, and they approved of him over me. She asked him over the night I left for the motel. Apparently, her ultimate goal was to leave me for him. He wouldn't leave Tiffany for her, and he despised hearing about her family, so he certainly wouldn't pursue anything other than a hidden affair. I expected to be much furious than I was, but I had already started to move on. I had just had a comprehensive health exam at my new doctor's office and received a clean bill of health, with no STDs, so I didn't have to worry about that. Getting outraged would be counterproductive at this stage. I was told that I was informed late because no one knew how to break the news to me, which is understandable. So yep, my ex was absolutely shunned, even by Tiffany's ex, who simply disappeared. She was blocked and left to cope with her troubles on her own. Tiffany simply knew that she had lost her work for good and spent all of her leisure time with her family. They had finally triumphed, in a sense. It was discovered 2 nights earlier that she had committed suicide at home. Her relatives discovered her. When the medical team arrived, one of the old friends from the neighborhood showed up. Her family was there and they didn't seem to care. Tiffany contacted me last night just to let me know. There were other messages, and she asked me, as gently as possible, if I wanted mine for closure. I honestly don't know what to do about it. I'm experiencing a lot of mental whiplash right now. I never knew this woman. I've had to acknowledge over the last month, since returning home, that she was abusive in our relationship because of everything she put me through with her family. Now it appears that it was a ploy to drive me away so she could be with another man who her family appeared to like. This confuses me even more, because what did he have that I didn't? Did they simply love watching her life fall apart? Was there anything real about her? Was there anything real about the folks with whom I spent years of my life? Returning home was the best decision I've ever made, and I now have complete evidence of that. I can begin therapy to work through this issue, spend time with a group of individuals who are truly trustworthy in person rather than online, and have relatives nearby for support. But yes, this will be with me for a long time. Comments? Comment. Do not read the letter. It will do you no good. Give it to a therapist to read, have them reseal it in another envelope and let them decide whether or not you should read it based on your mental health. Or if it should be unread and burned. OOP, I'm not interested in the letter or anything related to them. It's time to go on with my life. Am I the asshole for being disappointed when my boyfriend did not give me the first slice of cake? Original post, September 8, 2024. Why, 20F, AM from Brazil, and here it is tradition that in a birthday party the person whose birthday is being celebrated gives the first slice of cake to their favorite person after everyone sings the birthday song. This week was my boyfriend's, 24M, and he had 3 celebrations, one with his birth family, one with his adoptive family, and one with friends, which was a surprise picnic that I planned and organized. He has had a very difficult life and his moms are really important to him as the adoptive mom saved him from starving as a kid and raised him, giving him a chance at life, and his birth mom battled very hard against poverty all her life, struggling and fighting to keep her kids alive and well. So of course I never expect him to give me the first slice of cake at the family celebrations. But then there was the picnic. I spent weeks planning and reaching out to all his childhood friends, making sure they would come. I went to bed at 2 a.m. the night before making him his favorite cake. I spent a shit ton of money with food, drinks and gifts. I didn't do it because of the first slice of course, but at all times I couldn't help but think, now is my turn. Turns out it was not. He has a best friend of many years, she and him are like brother and sister, they went through a lot of shit together. Like her losing her mom, him not having food to eat at home as a teen. And even though they are so close, they don't get the chance to see each other very often now as they both are very busy with life and all its shit. So of course he took the chance to show her some appreciation. She was so happy and, of course I understood the situation, he sees me every day and has the chance to honor me almost daily. He always makes me feel really loved and all, and he can't do that with her. Also, I understand he wanted to show her that him having a relationship does not mean she is not his sister anymore, a priority in that sense. I am not jealous, because I know there is nothing romantic between them. She is pretty gay and polygamous. He is the most monogamous guy in the world and he worships me. But I couldn't help but at least feel a bit, I don't know, do I need to explain? Maybe disappointed, maybe unappreciated. I feel like I can never be the most important person in the room. We always talk about getting married, we are each other's life and still, get me? And also, he did this in front of everyone, in front of all our mutual friends who don't really know her and all she means to him, so I also felt kind of embarrassed. I am just venting. I want to go home and cry a bit. I know I am being childish, but I guess I will keep it that way for now. Update September 8, 2024, 6 hours later. My boyfriend did not give me the first slice of cake. Update. Hi everyone, thank you for all the kind comments. Me and my boyfriend have very different energy spans, so I usually leave hangouts a lot earlier than him, which is what happened today. So I left, posted the story on Reddit, took a shower and started to paint my nails. About 3 hours after I left, my boyfriend called me. I picked him up and he was sobbing. Notice he does not have Reddit and he does not speak English, so he didn't know about the post, and I had not talked about my feelings with him yet. So he calls me absolutely pouring, saying he was going home and he has had the best day of his life. That he loves me so much for doing this for him, and spends the next 15 minutes talking between sobs about all the effort I put into the birthday celebration, thanking me for every single one of the things I did. Then he mentioned the cake slice. He said to me that throughout his entire life, because he has always had birthdays in his mom's houses, he had never given a first slice to his best friend, who went through all that with him, and that me being empathetic enough to let him do this was honestly one of the most special things I had ever done for him. He told me she had been going through some very important stuff and he was not around ever because of work and college, and she was feeling very left behind because of this, which is a huge thing since they are basically brother and sister. So the cake made her cry so much. It was the first time he had ever done this and she finally felt like he had not forgotten about her. And then, because I made that much effort for him, he asked me to rest. He told me that this next week was going to be entirely for him to show me appreciation. He asked me to please for once not sabotage him showing me love and pampering me because I feel like I don't deserve it. Because he was going to take his savings to take me out and spend the week giving me surprises. I know him well enough to expect some love notes. Him showing up to surprise me at my place, maybe even a song written for me. He also invited me to spend the weekend at his place, just the two of us. He lives with his family and they are all going to the beach, leaving the house empty. So that he can cook me dinner and give me one of his 1-hour-long full-body massages. They are my favorites. Then, after he said all that, I took the opportunity to tell him about how I felt today. He listened quietly, and when I was finished, he apologized, saying that he did not realize that was how I felt, that was not his intention. He just thought that did not mean as much to me as it would have meant for his best friend, so he decided to honor her that way and then honor me differently. With my Princess Week. But he told me he understood how I felt and that he was sorry anyway. We talked a bit more, but we got over the stuff pretty quickly and it all ended with us gossiping about the day, because two friends of ours who don't really get along very well apparently went back home together and half drunk after I left. Man, I love gossip. Well friends, I suppose that's my update. Maybe this is the day Reddit realizes that emotions are complicated and life is too, which is why small moments do not define a relationship or someone's feelings. How we react to the situation and deal with it does. I love my boyfriend, and he loves me a lot too, and that does not mean he does not have any family beyond me. That also does not mean I'm not allowed to feel sad. I have the right to feel what I feel and to be welcomed in that feeling, being validated. I will marry this man, mark my words. After confronting my husband's friend about pressuring his sick fiancé into having kids, I question if I overstepped or just told the truth. Original post, September 7, 2024. Obligatory throwaway, my 32F husband, 36M, has a high school friend, 36M. Let's call him John. John is a typical jock. Athletic, good-looking, popular with girls. But I've been around enough to see and hear him being questionable towards women. To the story, we were in a group of friends and I was introducing them to my new baby, 0F. Important info. I had a miserable pregnancy. The topic of having kids came up and John started saying how he and his fiancée, 32F, would be the next. More important information, his fiancée Janet is an amazing lady. Kind, smart, gentle. Recently she has been through a lot, lost her dad and her health has been terrible. Not going to say what, but she has a disease that causes headaches, weakness, dizzy spells, fainting, extreme fatigue. She has become more and more emotionally and physically dependent on him. On top of that she, and I, come from another country. It means her family and support system are not here. Back to the situation. I asked her if they plan to have kids after the wedding, that is in 2 years. I thought that because it gives her time to recover. He doesn't let her answer and say they agreed they would only get married after having kids. I am surprised for 2 reasons. She always said she wanted kids after marriage and her health is not good. She doesn't say anything, but looks sad. I argue that it doesn't seem like a good plan, and that a pregnancy now could put her health at risk. He said her fertility window is almost closing and that is now or never. I start getting angry, and we discuss. I ended up saying he is selfish and this decision is only based on his wants and needs and is hurting her. Basically a form of abuse. The room got quiet and we ended up leaving. My husband later agreed with me, but said it was not my place to say anything. Our friends are mixed, saying someone had to say it, but that I was too harsh. I feel maybe was not my place and I was being a busybody, but after being through a hard pregnancy myself, without my family, I know how hard it is. And my husband is a great supportive guy. Meanwhile John leaves her alone all the time to party and enjoy life. He is dooming someone that trusts him blindly into a horrible situation. AITA? Relevant comments. Commenter. What you said was the truth, but you were a little harsh. I think you were right to say it because the guy obviously doesn't care how he treats his wife. I also think you should ask ** his fiancée in private how she feels about her situation. OOP. I agree that I came out too strong. I feel protective towards her. She is so sweet and nice. I feel she doesn't deserve the way he treats her. But when I say something in private, she keeps repeating that she loves her and she never met a man like him. I feel she thinks that he is out of her league or something. Commenter. Honestly, I think he knows what he's doing. There's a reason he won't legally commit to her until after she has children, and it's not a kind or responsible reason. So I don't think he's going to care about what you said or the potential health outcomes for your friend. It may be satisfying to call him out, but is it going to change his mind? OP, I also found this part extra strange. The first time we met she literally said how her dream was to have a wedding and then kids. She even repeated that recently. She comes from a Catholic upbringing, like me. It doesn't seem like a thing you change your mind about easily. Commenter. ESH, except his wife. In this conversation fight both you and John are treating his wife as if she's a child that can't make decisions for herself. He is talking over her but you are also making assumptions about their decisions based on her looking sad. OOP, I admit I should have talked to her first. But we just had a conversation about her health and she was telling me how some days she can barely make it out of bed. His smugness made me so angry, as if he knows what is best and no one can question him. Commenter. Honestly, I would be pissed if someone started talking and arguing about my health issues in public. I'm a really private person. Does the rest of the group know about her health issues? You didn't speak to her, but made assumptions. She might not confide in you anymore. He might be an asshole, but she is an adult and you could have made it worse for her. I had 2 awful pregnancies and was alone without family around, but my husband is amazing as well. I get where you are coming from, but seriously be more aware next time and show your friends some respect. And don't talk about people's medical history in front of people. ESH, obviously not your friend. OP, I see your point. The group started with some people that studied together and expanded with their SO. We meet often and are friendly. When she got sick, we took turns visiting, checking up on her when she was alone for a reason or another. Everyone seems to try to be her support system, but seem afraid to say anything to John. Commenter. He probably does and just doesn't care. John is aware that his wife isn't in a good place for kids. If he and OP's husband are such great friends, why didn't he say anything? Call out your friend's shitty behavior, people. OOP, my husband is great, but everyone jokes he has a man crush on John. He was John's sidekick in school and doesn't listen when I point out some comments John makes. OOP is voted NTA but opinions are mixed. Update, September 10, 2024, 3 days later. Thank you for all the answers. I was blown away by all the perspectives and was able to see further into the situation. I reached out to Janet and invited her for a coffee. We usually talk with more people around, so this was the first time we were alone. I started by apologizing. I said I should not have said all these things in front of everyone and acted as if she cannot speak for herself. She said she was initially embarrassed, but after further thought she started questioning if it was really a good idea to have kids now and has scheduled a talk with a specialist. She said John doesn't know, and she wants to have more information before talking to him. She also said he was furious afterwards and they had a terrible fight. So you guys were right, it was not the right move, and he did blame her, saying she should have defended their position and that she knew having kids was a must for him. He also said that a woman would only be a real woman if she gave her man biological children. She asked him what if she could not, and apparently he never answered. It seems more has happened in the fight, but I decided not to pressure her and let her tell me what she was comfortable with. Lastly, she decided to take some time off and go home to her mom, and I think it is a great idea. The saddest for me was that she cried saying someone like her would never get a man like him, and that she was scared of losing him. That it was like she found a golden ticket. I held my tongue, because I personally do not think he is a prize. But again I took the advice and did not pressure further. I also had a long talk with my husband, and we are at odds. He still thinks I am overreacting and that John poops gold. I am frustrated, but not much I can do for now. Not a fantastic update, but it has only been a few days, so I will let you know if there is anything big happening. After discovering my husband's affair with my best friend, I face loss, divorce, and find new love in a lifelong friendship. Original post, June 5, 2023. OOP and her husband had been together since she was 19 and he was 22. Married for 6 years now with 2 kids, third baby on the way. She found out her dad has cancer. Her mother passed away when she was 12. OOP's husband has been very supportive from day one and suggested that she step away from her job for a while to take care of her family. OOP has her best friend who she knew since they were babies. Both families grew up together. After going to wake her husband up, she discovered her friend's text messages to him from his phone. Realizing it has been going on for 4 months when OOP's husband and her best friend have been lying to her. She tries to figure out what to do next that she knows now about the affair. Update 1. June 5, 2023, same day, 14 hours later. OOP spent a good amount of time gathering and documenting everything she has on her husband and her best friend. Used her dad's hospice care plan as a front cover so her husband doesn't know she knew about his infidelity. She is thinking about going back to work, but working with a lawyer first to get things in order should she move forward with the next steps of her life. Per her lawyer, OOP doesn't have to worry about her inheritance from her parents, which her husband cannot touch at all. While her husband was at work, OOP revealed what took place between her husband and best friend to their mothers, who are now upset about the whole incident. Met with the lawyer, OOP gets her finances, logistics, and everything in order to make sure she is in a good position to go after her husband and best friend. Update 2. June 6, 2023, 1 day later. OOP names the characters in the posts. MIL and File, Ruth and Joe. ex-BFF's parents, Angie and Bob. Ex-BFF, Jess/STBX, Tyler. Ex-BFF's brother, Jake. OOP's dad. Dad. OOP provides a quick summary on how things went so quickly in the last couple posts. She was able to meet with her OBGYN on the same day to get checked, all clear. Several more tests were done and waiting for the results to arrive. OOP met with her lawyer to go over everything, including her husband's financial records, which she got a hold of to make sure her bases are covered. If everything goes well with what she got, OOP should not have any problems with getting the divorce papers within a month. Ruth and Angie, MIL and ex-BFF's mothers, told OOP what happened after both sets of parents confronted Tyler, EX, and Jess, ex-BFF. All 4 parents are very upset with both Tyler and Jess for the affair, and they have been cut off from their families. Tyler discovers OOP has moved her stuff and their children's stuff to her dad's to get away. Damaged the house and went to look for OOP. She left for her dad's cabin with her kids, now away and safe. Tyler is arrested after trying to break into OOP's dad's house, not cabin. OOP had to get her own therapy session and will set up therapy sessions for her children. Per her lawyer, OOP is collecting text messages from Jess, who told her to fix everything, especially her parents cutting her off. Blamed OOP for stealing Tyler from her. Tyler wanted to reconcile, But OOP isn't giving in. He doesn't know about the divorce papers yet until he is served. OOP suspected Tyler and Jess won't be staying together since their parents have confronted them. Jess's brother Jake is on leave from the military. He steps in to help OOP and her family per Angie and Bob. OOP thanks Redditors for continuing support as she deals with the whole situation on Tyler and Jess. Update. 3. June 12, 2023. 6 days later. Tyler finds OOP's post and asks if she is serving him the divorce papers. OOP said yes. He begs for forgiveness for his behavior toward her. OOP has regular meetings with her lawyer to make sure she has everything as needed. Jake is doing great, being a great support system for OOP and her children. OOP's dad is not doing well, now in the hospital for a while. Kids are adjusting well along with therapy already set up to cope with unexpected events in their lives after moving away from Tyler. Still pregnant for a couple more months. Update 4. July 23, 2023. 1 month later. OOP's dad has died. Her marriage ended in dissolution after Tyler was served with the papers. Per her lawyer, the dissolution process was quick and smoothly after Tyler gave OOP everything she asked for in the divorce papers. OOP has full custody of the kids with visitations for Tyler. Therapy is going on for OOP and her kids. Still pregnant, but the baby is doing well. OOP's ex-MIL, Ruth, and ex-BFF's mom Angie are helping her with the kids. All three women are on great terms with each other. Jake has gone back to his active duties but will be back to help OOP and her children. Their friendship is great and might be moving on to the next step, but Jake and OOP are taking things slowly. Tyler and Jess are no longer together. He has left Jess, who has been blacklisted from her family after the blow-up. Update 5. In comments. August 23, 2023. 1 month later. OOP is back with a small update. Her baby boy was born slightly prematurely, but he didn't have to do a NICU stay. Angie, ex-BFF's mom, was present at the birth while Ruth, MIL, stayed with the older children. Both Ruth and Angie took turns staying with OOP for several weeks to assist with the baby and his siblings. OOP is very glad to have support from both mothers. Sadly, the baby doesn't get a chance to get to know his grandpa, OOP's dad, who passed on a few weeks before. Jake is in the process of moving back home after receiving some news on a change in his military career. He has been offered an early retirement, which was not his fault at his base. OOP stated Jake is looking for a place but might stay with her and her children temporarily until he has a place to live in. Tyler, EX, was upset because he wasn't allowed in the room when OOP gave birth. OOP will give more updates on her ex when things calm down. Update 6, October 14, 2023. 2.5 months later. OOP answers prior questions regarding Tyler before giving the latest update. MIL is no contact while FIL is low contact with Tyler when he has supervised visits with the kids. He has cheated on OOP with another girl besides Jess. OOP is not worried about Jess having a sibling relationship with Jake, brother, because they didn't have a great relationship growing up. Jake had been in low contact with Jess prior to the blow-up and has remained the same since then. OOP's oldest child understands the situation with Tyler. Both kids are in therapy per OOP in order to have healthy coping methods with their dad being out. OOP doesn't want to accept any donations from strangers to help out. She has her inheritance from her dad who has passed on. OOP gave a great update on her baby boy who has been reaching all milestones despite the fact being born slightly prematurely. Her oldest children are in love with their baby brother. Angie and Bob, Jess's parents, have been called grandparents, being there for OOP and her children. Tyler wasn't at the birth but has blown up at OOP for not letting him see his child. Per OOP's requests at the hospital where she works as an RN, Tyler was escorted off the property for OOP's own safety. Since then Tyler hasn't paid any visits to see his children. Turned out he has gotten a new girlfriend and now wasn't interested in seeing his kids after FIL paid a visit to check in with Tyler. OOP has been keeping in touch with Jake who has been very thoughtful of OOP. Had some food delivered to OOP and catching up. Jake also checked in with OOP's children to make sure they are well. Respected OOP's boundaries. He will be coming home in the next few months to take care of personal business including house hunting. OOP is looking forward to having Jake's visits. What about OOP herself? Therapy has been helpful since she started. Sad about her father's passing. Shared how her relationship with her dad was great. Glad to have Angie and Ruth in her corner along with a large support system. OOP is sad for her children because they don't have their dad in their lives now after Tyler has bailed out on them once he had a new girlfriend. OOP is preparing to head back to work and find a new normal for herself and her children. Ready for a new chapter to start. Update 7, December 25, 2023, 2 months later. OOP shared a short update. She received a surprise for Christmas when Jake came home to visit her and her children. The older children have stated Santa has brought Uncle Jake home. Update 8. February 9, 2024, 1.5 months later. OOP shared some news since the last few updates. Tyler hasn't seen the kids since he started dating his girlfriend. Stop talked with FIL, who was the middleman for OOP and Tyler for their children's visits. OOP has offered alternative ways of communication for their children's sake. Tyler turned them down because he chose his girlfriend over his children who haven't seen for a while. OOP has figured she was going to be a single mom after Tyler bailed out. Ruth and Angie have provided childcare while OOP adjusts to her work schedule. Very glad to come home to happy children, a clean home, and dinner on the stove. Briefly, OOP was asked if she's religious. She has stated she's not judging people and has encouraged people to be themselves for who they are. OOP shared that she's dating Jake currently. Stating the air quotes because Jake and OOP are taking things slowly. OOP received her first kiss. Went out on several dates here and there, but also included kids for movie nights at home. Things are going well for both. Jake and OOP might enter the boyfriend and girlfriend phase. Jake has been very supportive, helping OOP with her kids including the baby boy. Jake has been very respectful of OOP's boundaries, which makes OOP so glad she has someone who understands her. OOP shared she wanted to wait and receive Jake's stamp of approval on what she shares with the Reddit community. Update 9, May 24, 2024, 3 months later. It has been almost a year since OOP first discovered her ex-husband's affair. OOP shared a quick update on some Redditors who saw Jake's comment on OOP's Reddit account being locked out. Turned out it was Jess who changed the password. OOP explained from the beginning how she found Jess walking into her house while Jake was outside in the backyard with the kids. Jess has tried to make threats against OOP while in the kitchen. Jake managed to get inside after hearing OOP's screams. He got Jess out of the house before the police were called. Jess made up a story to the police and accused OOP for threatening her. It backfired at Jess as OOP had cameras everywhere and showed the police the evidence. Jess was escorted off the property. That was when Jess hacked into OOP's social media accounts including Reddit, but OOP managed to stop Jess from accessing Reddit. Jess later spammed OOP's job, resulting in a week's suspension. OOP was cleared after the evidence showed OOP was telling the truth and Jess was falsifying everything. What led OOP to get a restraining order against Jess was when she tried to pick up OOP's oldest son from school without anyone knowing about it. The school was well aware after meeting with OOP regarding Tyler being violent in front of the kids prior. They escorted Jess off the school campus and kept OOP's oldest safe until OOP came for the pickup. OOP has an emergency order in place, but will be at the court to request for a permanent one within the next month or so. Locks were changed immediately after the incident with Jess and the police. Angie and Bob are very angry with their daughter for what happened. There is no update on Tyler. OOP shares that she hasn't heard from him since he last bailed out on the visitations with their children. OOP realized her oldest has wanted Jake to be the dad instead of Tyler. She knew the kids were moving forward and accepting the fact of Tyler not being in their lives anymore. OOP learns from Ruth and Joe, Tyler's parents, that Tyler has remarried and is expecting a baby with his new wife. Ruth told OOP she and Phil got invitations from Tyler and his wife. That is how OOP learned about Tyler. OOP's 2 children are still in therapy and was informed her oldest is ready to call Jake dad instead of Tyler. Her middle child seems to move on and forget who Tyler was since both children have been bonding well with Jake. Now on to Jake. OOP realized she has been feeling so much happier now when Jake has been around and creating a healthy relationship. It is a blessing for OOP to have Jake there because he checks in regularly when he is at work or anywhere away from OOP and her kids. It showed OOP Jake cares about her and her family. Jake told OOP she is his girlfriend practically the whole time. Update 10. June 26, 2024, 1 month later. OOP is back with a new update. This time, it's on the restraining order she has against Jess. OOP wasn't approved for a permanent one, but did receive a 7-year restraining order. Where she is located, It appears to be very difficult to obtain a permanent restraining order without any additional and hard evidence that could result in a life or death situation. If Jess resumes her harassment onto OOP after 7 years are up, OOP can take her back to the courts for another restraining order. OOP requests no more questions regarding Jess as she is ready to move on after she has the restraining order in place. OOP made an additional comment to confirm her children are also included in the restraining order against Jess, so all good. Per OOP, Jake is doing great, and has moved in with OOP and her children. They are all thrilled with the next step, OOP again stating the fact she has known Jake all her life so she's not worried. There's nothing new with Tyler since he has made no contacts with his children. The children are doing well. Part 1 of 2 updates. September 10, 2024. If you are triggered by mentions of death and drug use, you should probably skip this update. I will be making an entirely different post for the life updates so you won't miss anything. Please take care of your mental health first. Hey guys, I have some news. I'm not entirely sure on how to say it, so I'm just going to say it. Jess was found deceased in her apartment from a drug overdose at the end of July. To say it was a shock would be an understatement of the century. Jess was the kind of girl who never touched a drug in her life. Even back in the day when I would partake in smoking weed from time to time, she would pick a fight with me about it. A part of me is devastated. She was my best friend and we went through so much together, we had so much history. She wrote me a letter. I'm not going to go into every single detail about it, but I will highlight one main part of it. She told me she saw I was trapped in an unhappy, loveless marriage and she wanted to help me get out of it. She didn't know what to do, so one night when she started doing drugs, she decided to get rid of Tyler. The only way she knew how was by sleeping with him. From there things spiraled and she fell in love with him, and became jealous because he would fill her head with pretty white lies and then go home to me. While I don't forgive her for what she did to me, I get it. I do. Jake has been blaming himself of sorts. Yes, he was pissed at her, but he didn't want her dead. None of us did. He's been having a hard time with things, but in true Jake fashion, he's been shoving his grief to the side to be there for everyone else. He stayed with his parents the first month after everything happened to take care of them, and then would come check on me at least twice a day. He still won't really talk about it, so I try to be there for him in every way possible without the use of words. Angie isn't doing well. She lost a child, and even though she cut her off, that's still her daughter and she still loves her. I've been stopping by their house once a day to check on her and bring her meals to ensure everyone is eating. Jake's dad. Well, he's been handling it much better than I thought. Jess was always closer to him, but he told me, maybe I'm a heartless bastard, but once I saw the woman she was becoming, I stopped thinking of her as my daughter. I already grieved the loss of my daughter a long time ago. So there's that. Just to put it out there, nobody is blaming me. They made the choice to cut Jess out of their life of their own free will, and I made it clear to them when all of this first came out that I wouldn't blame them if they wanted to keep their relationship with their daughter-sister. Angie even made it a point to tell me it's not my fault, and we hugged and cried together. We're not sure if she did it on purpose or if she had letters for everyone as a backup in case she happened to overdose, but the letters weren't out in the open by her body. They were tucked away in a drawer. To end this update, I just want to make it clear that though I had a lot of hate in my heart for Jess, there was also a lot of love there too. She hurt me and betrayed me, but had she not done that, I would still be stuck married to a man I felt indifference towards and would not be as happy as I am. She did it in a fucked up way, but in a sense she did free me from my shackles. I will always love her, and this loss is one that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Relevant comments. OOP on how Jess's parents and brother, Angie and Bob, and Jake are taking the news of her death. OP. Angie and her husband are in grief counseling, but it's not something Jake is interested in. I did try to push him on it, but he said he'd rather deal with the loss in his own way. I've been respecting that choice, but I do bring it up to him from time to time to ensure no one will think any less of him if he needs help processing. I did manage to get him to attend one of my therapy sessions with me about the grief, and he did get some things off his chest, but he'd rather handle his grief quietly, so I haven't been too overbearing about it. What has OOP know so far about Jess getting into drugs? OOP, personally, I don't think Jess started doing drugs until after the affair was discovered. I think that's what triggered her into finding this new escape. I'd like to believe I would have noticed something that big, but I was also so wrapped in grief over losing my only remaining parent that maybe I did miss some signs. I know without a doubt I would have noticed if she was high around me though, so if it was pre-discovery, she didn't do them around me or hang out with me if she was high. OOP on if Tyler has known what happened or not. OOP. If Tyler knows he didn't say anything to me about it. I also didn't reach out to him and freely offer the information. I really hate to say this, but her obsession with Tyler ran much deeper than I initially realized. I thought it was just a fling, but after going through her apartment and helping Angie and Jake clear it out, I realized that what she felt for him was really walking the line of obsession. There's a part of me that feels like this was her cry to him, to see if he would run back to her and rescue her from herself. OOP's thoughts on if Jess had always wanted what OOP had. Being jealous of OOP in her life. OOP. I think you're pretty close, and this is me making an educational guess because only Jess truly knows, but I like to think I know her well enough to answer this. Had Jess and I fallen out any other way, her parents wouldn't have cut me off unless I did to her what she did to me. They would have distanced from me, and helped Jess through it. This is the first time they made this decision. We've had our fair share of arguments and her parents would take her side, even if she was wrong. Jess was very close to her dad, and while he was like a dad to me as well, we didn't really have that father-daughter bond. Angie always looked after me because my mom was her best friend, and she did mother-daughter things with me since I lost mine so young. But she did more with her own daughter than me, which I never felt ill will towards. Jess and Angie were also close, and Angie always made sure Jess never felt unloved or left out. And Jess even made comments over the years that she was glad that her mom stepped in for me, but never overstepped. They had countless talks about it to the point Jess would come to me and joke about it saying, "Mom's having one of her moments where she wants to make sure I'm not jealous or upset that she did this and this with you, lol." Her and Jake were never close growing up. More so because all of Jess's friends used her to get closer to Jake, though I'm the first friend of Jess's that Jake actually made a move on. He would ignore the friends and Jess would blame him for it. I'm going to try to word this as gently as possible without trying to sound like a complete asshole. Jess was always boy crazy, the girl who was constantly vying for a man's attention. While I don't think there's anything wrong with that, there is something wrong in how Jess went about it. She saw men as a way to prove her worth. However, teenage boys and even men can be pretty shallow, and the men Jess typically went after were pretty shallow. Jess was always bigger. I wouldn't say she was full-out fat, but she had a belly and hips, and I didn't stay over 100 pounds until I had my first child, and even then I was still skinny. So of course, these shallow-ass men, when they saw her and I together, they would divert their attention to me instead of her. I of course always ignored them, but I think that had set a deep-rooted insecurity in her, that she was always second best to me when it came to men. I never saw it that way, and I never went after the men she liked. I married Tyler, and shortly after I married Tyler, Jess got married to the guy I had a crush on in high school. I truthfully didn't care because it was an innocent crush and I never acted on it, but the guy was an ass and in his wedding speech made a comment about how he got second best to what he really wanted, and everyone hated the guy. All of us begged her to not marry him once he showed his true colors long before that wedding speech. But she saw it as me being jealous and we actually stopped talking for a while because of it. So I think getting my husband to sleep with her was her way of proving she wasn't second best. Only when my husband didn't pursue a relationship with her like she hoped, she became obsessed with the idea of him and trying to prove she was the better lover. I don't know what the end goal was truthfully, but I just hope she's at peace now. Part 2 of 2. Updates, September 10th, 2024, same day, 1 hour later. Hey guys, I know the last post was heavy, so if you need someone to talk to, please feel free to reach out. I understand stuff like that leaves its mark. Here's to a more cheerful update. Tyler is still MIA from the kid's life. Still hasn't reached out, and I'm not chasing after him to be involved with the kids. They deserve more from their dad. The kids are doing just wonderful. They've really taken to Jake, even the baby calls him Dada, and once he and I had a long talk about it, I've decided that if the kids want to call him Dad, I won't intervene. My oldest made the transition from Uncle Jake to Dad. My middle child still calls him Uncle Jake, but that's completely fine with me. How they want to pursue that relationship, I will let them. Jake actually started coaching their indoor soccer league and they love having him there. The house just has this sense of peace now, and all of them are just so happy that it makes my heart so full. I did have a conversation with them about Aunt Jess being in heaven with Papa, and they took it well, probably because they've hardly seen her in the last year. Tyler's parents have still been just as involved and are actually really close to Jake's parents. They've all been so wonderful that sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming. Angie, and I think the fake name I assigned Angie's husband was Bob, please bear with me if I'm wrong. Bob has retreated a little from the kids' life to deal with their grief, which I completely understand. They do still see the kids at least once a week, and Angie mentioned it helps her, spending time with them. Roughly 2 weeks after Jess passed away, Jake asked me to marry him. I told him I wasn't saying no, but I wanted him to sit with this a little longer and make sure this was something he actually wanted and he wasn't making a hasty decision in the midst of grief. A month later, after the dust had started to settle and things were slowly falling back into our routines, he asked me again. He had this whole speech about how he's wanted this for as long as he could remember, and even mentioned how when we were kids he said he would marry me when we grew up. It's true, he did say that to me when I was like 5 lol, so I said yes. We are having a long engagement. I don't want to jump right back into a marriage, so we're taking our time and haven't even started wedding planning yet. Maybe come 2025 we'll start the plans. To be totally honest though, we've just been debating on an elopement, something small with just his parents and the kids. Who knows though, we have time to figure it out. Life has been a whirlwind full of ups and downs, but I'm so lucky to have so many wonderful people who love me and my kids. As always, thank you for being here with me throughout this journey. I love you guys. Until next time. Relevant comments. OOP on how Angie and Bob are taking the news of her engagement. OOP, Angie is very thrilled. She's actually been doing some wedding planning, and I've been letting her do her own thing. I think it's helping keep her busy. When we told Angie and Bob, Angie actually started crying. She said that her and my mom used to joke about us growing up and getting married, and they were thrilled about the idea of them becoming actually related by marriage. Bob is happy because he knows Jake is a good man who would, in his words, take care of you and the kids, and if he did anything to hurt me, all I needed to do was call him and he'd put the fear of God in Jake, lol. Am I the asshole for hiding my boyfriend's anime body pillow while my parents were visiting? Original post. My boyfriend, M32, and I, F27, have been together for a year. He's only met my parents once over the holidays last year because they live pretty far away. They've been visiting this past week, and since he and I just moved in together, they were excited to see our new place and get to know my BF a little more. We have an extra bedroom, and this has become my boyfriend's gaming room for the most part, but we agreed when guests come over it would be a second bedroom. He really likes video games and anime in particular, so he has a lot of toys and artwork that he's collected over the years from different games and such. One thing he has is this anime body pillow that features a sexy anime girl on it. He also has a mousepad for his gaming computer that resembles a busty anime girl. Before my parents came over, I asked him to take down his toys and stuff so they could be comfortable. I was upset to see that he left the body pillow and the mousepad in place. I don't really feel comfortable with either item, but he's really into anime, so I've always kind of left it alone. But I absolutely didn't think it was appropriate to leave it there when my parents would be staying over. I took the cover off the body pillow and put the pillow in the closet, and I put the mousepad in a drawer in our room. When my parents arrived and we showed them to their room, my BF noticed the missing pillow and mousepad. Later, when we were in bed, he brought it up to me and asked why I hid them. I told him I didn't think my parents would feel comfortable with those things in the bedroom, and when they leave we can put them back. My BF got really upset. He told me that he feels like I'm ashamed of his interest in anime. He said he spent his whole life feeling like people think he's weird for being into anime, and he didn't expect his own GF to be just like everyone else. The next day I noticed him taking some of his manga books off our bookshelf and putting them into a box. I asked him why, and he said something like, "I'm putting them away so you don't have to look at them anymore." I feel really bad. I feel like I hurt him, but I just really didn't think my parents would feel comfortable sleeping in a room with those items. But now he's just acting so distant and cold, and he's not really engaging with my parents at all. They keep asking me what's wrong and I don't know what to say. AITA? Top comment. Talking mice. There's a huge difference between anime video game decorations and sexualized anime content. A busty mousepad and a sexy body pillow would most definitely make anyone feel uncomfortable. I get that it's his space too, but I think a small amount of compromise for a limited time isn't a problem at all. He might see it as you being embarrassed of his interests, but the reality is most people aren't comfortable with sexualized decor. It's not about anime at all. NTA, he really needs to have more consideration for others. OOP. That's exactly my feelings too. There's other stuff in the room that's anime gaming related that was left up, but it was more the sexual stuff I didn't feel comfortable leaving out for my parents. OOP is voted NTA update. Edit. Thank you for all of the responses. And sorry it took me a few days to update. I was waiting for my parents to leave so I could talk to my boyfriend about all of this. I read through the comments and it kind of validated something I already was feeling. Sexual decor aside, the way he acted the next day when he was putting the books away really bothered me. I ended up explaining the situation to my parents and they weren't exactly thrilled by his reaction either. I got the feeling after this trip that they don't really approve of him. Which is neither here nor there. I'm 27 and I'm old enough to make my own choices. But above everything else, my parents mean a lot to me. I never get to see them, and it was important to me that my BF would be present and treat them well while they were here. After they left, I drove them to the airport. BF refused to come. I came back from the airport and found a couple trash bags outside the door. Turns out that once I left, my BF started throwing all of his anime things into these bags. I asked why and he said something along the same lines as before, that clearly his interests weren't welcome in my home and he'd keep them in his car until he figured out what to do with them. I kinda snapped. I'd been keeping it together all week for my parents but I had enough at this point. I told him I never asked him to get rid of his anime stuff, just that it wasn't appropriate for my parents while they were staying with us. I told him this reaction is unfair and he's being manipulative. I told him that this week was supposed to be about him getting to know my parents but he was too fixated on this anime issue to even spend any real time with them. He then called me manipulative for making him believe that I was cool with his love for anime for the past year when I was clearly ashamed of it. He also said he didn't want to be a part of a family that doesn't appreciate anime. We went back and forth for a while and then I told him we needed space. I wasn't even really planning that but it came out and it felt like the right thing for me. Well, he then started crying a lot and apologizing and immediately tried to take back what he said but I was just done at this point. He left eventually and now I'm here in this apartment alone. Well, and the mousepad and body pillow lol. He left those behind. Anyway. I don't really know if we're broken up officially or what but it seems to be heading that way. I'm just feeling awful and I almost wish this all happened before my parents visited because I feel like it tainted the whole trip. But yeah. Thanks for the replies guys and for helping me open my eyes a bit. Editor's note, I couldn't decide if this one was concluded or ongoing. I've marked it as ongoing for now, but if people disagree I can change it. My church banned our young worship leader for condemning Christian nationalism during a service. Other band members want to walk out. Original post. My church's youth group has a youth band that leads worship during youth, but the church also has them lead worship on Sunday mornings every few weeks, to promote the youth band when the usual worship team has a week off. I'm not in the band, but I often help with lyric PowerPoints along with another girl, but not when the band plays on Sundays. The main singer of the youth band is the daughter of a youth assistant, and the daughter is an assistant too. We'll call her Emma, she's 20. I'm writing because of what happened the last time the youth band led Sunday worship on 6/30. That led to Emma and her family leaving the church. In between one of the songs, Emma said she felt led to say that Christian nationalism wasn't of God, because forcing people to believe went against the basis of Christianity because God gave free will and too many Christians forgot that. She also said there would be no short and narrow path if people were forced to walk it before saying Project 2025 was advertised as Christian but resembled nothing of God, because God never forced people to believe in Him. No one confronted her or anything as it was brief, and they played a few more songs along with the closing song after the pastor finished his sermon. But when we got to youth on Friday night, Emma and her mother weren't there. And we were later informed, by the youth pastor, that Emma and her mom would no longer be helping the youth before a bunch of stuff about giving others the chance to be lead singers because Emma had left the church. However, word got out from one of the band's players that Emma told the band that she got banned during the week and that her parents left the church with her, so they already knew before we found out at youth. The reason I'm making this post is because of a conversation I had with the band and other PowerPoint girl. The same Friday the youth pastor announced it, and the conversation was private from the rest of the kids. Long story short, the band is upset about what happened to Emma, and they've been throwing around ideas on what to do. The one they're heavily considering is a walkout the next time they're scheduled to play on Sunday after playing the intro song. Service opens with an intro song before someone comes on stage to welcome everyone before worship continues, and they would voice support for Emma before walking out together. They haven't told anyone not associated with the band because they don't want anyone to spill the deets. But the main thing we're debating is repercussions from our parents and whether or not it's worth the risk. There's likely a few weeks until the band plays on Sunday again, and they still haven't decided on a new lead singer yet. I also want to add that the church didn't upload the worship portion of the service with Emma and only uploaded the sermon from that day, they always include worship on their YouTube upload of the service. Most of the concerns were around tuition punishments, as some of them have their parents helping pay, but they still want to do something. And while I'm not in the band technically, aside from coordinating PowerPoint lyrics occasionally, I figured the least I could do was get advice from other adults anonymously, because we don't want to ask our parents for obvious reasons, and maybe others could see more pros and cons that we can. I appreciate any advice that anyone gives and will relay it to the band too. Thanks to anyone who read this too. Edit. I forgot to add this detail in my post, but the pastor of our church has used the pulpit to speak politics in the past and has even mentioned support of a presidential candidate on numerous occasions, along with other political topics on occasion too. Roe v. Wade and gay rights. So while I agree that politics probably shouldn't be spoken in church, some of the band said that Emma was tired of the often political topics being brought up during sermons, thus why she said what she said. First update. I want to thank to everyone who commented on my original post, because it was way more than I expected, and many of you had really helpful advice. This is a small update with some really surprising things that happened since. First, the band is still going through with the walkout, and they're keeping it within the band so that no other kids tell their parents who might tell leaders. It would have been awesome to include others, but the risk of the church catching wind was too great. Second, we have a date of 8 quarters when the youth band will do worship for the adults again. Third, the youth pastor appointed a singer from within the group who will take turns singing on Sundays with future participants in the coming weeks. Fourth, the new singer agreed that the church's handling of Emma was BS. Fifth, and most exciting, 2 of the band members told non-religious relatives about the situation and fear of punishment, and they agreed to come to the service and let them head to their cars in the parking lot straight from the walkout, for safety. They won't leave the lot in case some parents try to claim kidnapping, but will be in their cars if all goes well, and the rest of us are going to ask our relatives too. Sixth, one of the band members told a teacher they knew from school who's thinking about coming and walking out too. And seventh, one of the band members wrote a little something that the lead singer will read before they walk off stage, and it would be great if anyone with editing experience could help to make it clearer or provide advice on what to add. They tried to keep it short. I will make a post about their write-up in the near future. Here's how we hope it happens. The band will play the opening song, which officially starts service, and usually lets people know it's starting. Many make their way from the foyer during the intro song. And after someone gives the welcome prayer after the opening song, the lead singer will then give the speech before the band walks off stage, and I will walk out with them from the pews along with relatives' friends. One relative said she might bring some people she knows too, which could make more of a statement to the church to see adults leaving too. One of the relatives will also record the whole thing in case any parents don't react well to it, and I will update after it happens. If anyone has any further advice, it would be appreciated, and I'll bring it to the band. Most of the band, outside of 2 seniors, aren't old enough to vote this year, but this is a chance to stand up for what's right against something that is adamantly infusing itself into Christianity, Christian nationalism, and making Christianity lose all of its respect in our opinion. We don't expect change to happen in the church as a result of our walkout, but it's a small thing we can do to say we did our part when faced with it ourselves. Another commenter put it best when she asked if we'd be able to live with ourselves if we did nothing, and the answer has been no for us so far. I also want to add something I forgot to clarify in my first post. Emma didn't say what she did out of the blue. She had been vocal about the pastor talking politics for some time according to the band, and I've seen much of it too. However, a lot of people sent DMs disagreeing with the band's decision. So before I get into it, I want to give specifics of what the pastor has done. The pastor mentioned Trump from the pulpit numerous times, including the aftermath of the 2020 election, to voice discontent over the results. He has also celebrated Roe v. Wade's overturning from the pulpit, Pride Month during June, and even compared Trump's legal trial to how Jesus was persecuted leading up to his crucifixion. Things that have no place being vented about from the pulpit, and this has happened over the course of a few years. I received a few DMs in the aftermath of my first post, and some were encouraging while others not so much. A few people, who said they were Christians, said that Emma was wrong to use the microphone to hijack the service with her words because she should have talked to the pastor first while calling her actions immature. However, when I showed the band the advice from my posts, I also told them about the DMs, and they said that Emma spoke to a leader about the pastor's political sermons in the past. But nothing came from it as he continued to speak politics from the pulpit frequently. Some people also said that our walkout wasn't godly, because we, like Emma, would be hijacking the service for a publicity stunt when church was supposed to be about God. Some people called us immature, among harsher things. But we disagree for two reasons. First, who is supposed to call out the misuse of the pulpit if not people who attend the same church where it's misused? A few DMs said to do nothing and pray for God to change the pastor's heart, but he's been doing this for years. And second, the Bible gives guidance on how to call out improper behavior in the church in Matthew 18:15, 17. Dealing with sin in the church. 15. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. 16. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. 17. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church, and if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Emma has already talked to a leader one-on-one, and the band has voiced displeasure about Emma's ban to the youth pastor, only for him to disagree and say that Emma was out of line. Regarding the part about tell it to the church, I suppose the how might be up to interpretation. Maybe telling the church means telling a church leader instead of the congregation on stage. But Emma and the band have talked to various leaders, including an elder too, aside of our youth leader, only for years of political rants from the pulpit to continue. When Jesus flipped tables in Matthew 21:12, we believe he did it because people were using the temple to sell things that had nothing to do with God, and we believe that politics falls into the same boat. Someone commented a link in the comments of my first post that I never saw. But I showed the band and we couldn't agree with it more. I still plan to speak with my parents ahead of 8 quarters, and I'll share the write-up the band is working on really soon. I really appreciate everyone who commented too. Lastly, I want to clarify that the walkout is the band's decision entirely. I am not a member of the band, I just do PowerPoint lyrics during youth, and I'm not even in the band's group chat with Emma. As some of the band members are contemplating punishments from parents, 2 seniors who are concerned with their parents removing tuition help, I will support whatever they decide while understanding that they have to take care of their future too, as many commented. If they decide to continue with the walkout, I will support them and walk out from the pews. But if they change their mind because repercussions are too great, I will respect that and continue to support them. Second update. I meant to get back to this sooner, but some things happened on and after 8 quarters. Since my previous post, the band decided not go through with the walkout, and Emma was a big reason why. The band told me that Emma spoke to them a few days before 8 quarters after she spoke to another bandmate who voiced concern. The girl who spoke to Emma was 15 and confided in her about physical abuse fears from her parents, and Emma spoke to the band on behalf of those fears. Emma also referenced some of the fears that the senior bandmates had about losing tuition support and told them that it wasn't worth risking their futures. Emma, unlike the band, had a full-time job to support herself, but some of the band was still tied to their parents for years. She pretty much told them to go with their gut if they had fears about repercussions from their parents, as the 15-year-old girl had, and the senior who feared losing tuition said that his parents threatened him with it in the past about something else, which is why he thought of it. I wasn't present when the band spoke to Emma because I'm not a member of the band. I only do PowerPoint lyrics and they tell me what songs before youth group, but they told me and the other PowerPoint girl afterward. So instead of playing on 8 quarters, the band collectively, and privately, resigned to the youth pastor at youth group the Friday before 8 quarters, and none of them played on 8 quarters. They also told their parents that they would before doing so, and a few of the bandmates said they were never forced to join the youth band by their parents. They simply volunteered. But that didn't mean they weren't gonna say anything about Emma's treatment. They just wanted to in a safer environment that wouldn't risk embarrassing their parents in front of the congregation, which could cost them privileges. Instead, they decided to share their write-up with Emma, who was planning on posting her own explanation of her ban from the church. Emma posted her explanation along with the band's write-up to her socials on 8 quarters regarding why the band collectively resigned, and a few bandmates decided to repost it on their socials. Emma also tagged the church's social in her post and believed that the walkout would do more harm to the band than good, so the social media route was a slightly better alternative. Not as many people will see it, but we believe potential rumors and gossip might do their thing. A few of the bandmates also told their parents that they would no longer attend that specific church. And while a few of them argued with their parents, perhaps it was less than the would have been backlash of embarrassing them with a church walkout. The 15-year-old girl ended up attending church on 8 quarters, but the seniors didn't, although they ended up returning the following Sunday. None of them, including myself, have attended youth group since the Friday right before 8 quarters, and I didn't attend on 8 quarters either. 2 unexpected things also happened. I received a DM from someone who said that they were from a Christian news outlet. And while I never heard of their outlet before, they asked permission to share the band's story in one of their newsletters anonymously, not including the band's names or the churches. And the band said they'll pray on it and weigh the decision. Additionally, a pastor reached out in DMs and said that he was encouraged by their story. He also said that pastors were supposed to hold each other accountable and asked for the name of the church so that he could reach out pastor to talk, but Emma and the band are undecided on this at the moment. They said they're going to pray on it along with how it's important to make sure it's a real pastor and that no harm will come to the church, and I told the pastor that I'll get back to him. Emma also told the band that her parents haven't talked to her much since her church statements, and that's because of arguments that they had. Some people thought that Emma's parents left the church in support of their daughter getting banned, but that wasn't the case. Her parents were banned too, and Emma said they didn't appreciate being blindsided by Emma's statement and received some backlash for them. Emma still stands by everything she said, but they aren't talking at the moment. The last thing I'll say is about me and how I feel about everything, and I'll leave the band's statement from Emma's post afterward. This was the last straw in a long line of stuff for me from this particular church, but it goes further than that. I struggle to understand how parents can care more about church appearances more than the needs and desires of their kids, and I'm not talking about bad things. I'm talking about normal things, and Emma's statement said it better than I could. Emma said that God gave everyone free will, but the 15-year-old girl vented about physical abuse in regards to not wanting to go to church in the past, and that is the opposite of what God taught. God didn't force people to believe in Him, but some parents take away privileges if they refuse to fall in line with God and their church. I barely even have any friends myself, and I'm not even in the band group chat. The band told me everything secondhand and none of them are my friends. They hang out together outside of church, but I only have one other friend from church because I've been homeschooled for all of my life because my parents think public school is too secular. I can't even do official sports aside from sports played in the church field that our homeschool group uses, so I can't do leagues or be on any teams like high school. I just wish my parents would have let me go to school, but apparently they don't think their religion is strong enough for me to go to school and supposedly not lose my faith. Kinda like they've been keeping me on training wheels for 17 years. Personally, I need a break from church. I know not all churches are bad because the one I happen to grow up in is questionable, but I've decided I'm not a Christian because I said the salvation prayer when I was like 7 or 8, and I don't think that counts. You don't know what you believe at that age because all you have is heavy bias from your parents, and I need a break to be unbiased in the future after my pastor has made some questionable decisions in recent years, venting politics in the church like the people who sold things that weren't of God before Jesus flipped tables. I'm going to try and learn about other religions because Christianity is all I ever knew, so I've stopped considering myself a Christian internally of late. Doesn't mean I'll never return, but I need a long break from Christianity because just thinking of modern Christians makes me sick. Too much hate disguised as Christianity and political overlap. I know there's good ones, but I have to broaden my perspective. And without a long break, I won't be able to be non-biased in my search. I've also argued with my parents about how I'll no longer attend church, but this is getting too long. Some of the band has faced punishments for not going, and that is the epitome of what's wrong with their twisted version of Christianity, so I hope a break will help me reset in some ways. The band's statement talked about how they would no longer attend the church, but I'm not sure if their parents were the reason they returned on Sunday morning after 8/4. Regardless, here is the write-up that they shared with Emma, and it's longer than what they likely would have been allowed to say before the walkout if someone cut their microphone, which is an advantage of social media in this case. This is the band write-up that Emma posted alongside her explanation of how she was banned. As Christians, we are called to worship Jesus Christ. But how does one become a Christian? By making a choice no one else can make for us, but the last part is something too many Christians forget. Jesus never forced anyone to follow him. Joshua 24:15 tells us to choose whom we will serve. But many have forgotten the part about free will and believe that fusing religion with conservatism is the way. The sole purpose of Christianity is a personal relationship with God. It has nothing to do with Christian nationalism, and those who try to use our faith as an excuse to control others are false prophets. As Christians, we shouldn't judge others because we are not God. But since our church has banned Emma and lied to the youth about how she chose to leave, we can no longer play or remain in a church where the pastor uses the pulpit to preach other than the gospel, and we pray that the true Spirit of God returns someday. New update. Something has been bugging me recently that I need to get off my chest, and I will at the end. I have not attended church in a few weeks, and I hope I never do again. My parents aren't thrilled, and we've talked about it. They haven't forced me to come, but this situation was the last straw for me. Since my previous update, one of the senior bandmates called to see how I was, and he gave an update on what's been happening since Emma's post that featured their statement. The senior who called me, John will say, has started community college. The other senior whose parents threatened to withdraw tuition has not. That senior was punished for quitting the band. The senior who called me was not. The 15-year-old girl who replaced Emma as the lead singer was forced to return to church by her parents along with another boy who was in the band too. Emma remained in contact with the band after the post, and he briefed me on what's been happening with her. Emma encouraged the two seniors to find a new church. The senior who was punished said he wasn't interested and only attended church because his parents forced him for much of his life. He also said he wouldn't attend church in the future because he wasn't ever really religious to begin with. The senior who called me, and wrote most of the statement, said he was tired of church hypocrisy and that the situation made him never want to attend church again, instead opting to practice privately on his own. Emma was sad that the situation soured their opinion of church, but she was also not looking for a new church to take time to find herself. When John asked if I would look for a new church, I told him no, but wasn't too specific other than saying I was tired. I'm going to be more specific here because some things have really been bothering me. A lot of comments said that we gave them hope for future generations of Christianity. But just reading that pissed me off personally, and I'm going to be more blunt than my previous posts. Personally, I hate modern Christianity in this country. I know it's not God's fault that many Christians are so hateful these days. But my distaste goes years before this incident because I feel like I never had a childhood. I'm fucking homeschooled for all my life because my parents think public school is too secular. Don't have many friends besides one. And my social skills suck because my only exposure is Sunday service and youth group twice a week. They police what I wear because of purity, and they didn't even let me do sports or anything fun that kids do growing up. But more than that, I'm scared with no one to talk to. My parents based my entire life on a religious that has no proof of its existence whatsoever. And when I tried to voice my fears in the past, they say I should know better, which is not substantial evidence. What's gonna happen when my time on earth ends if there's no God or judgment day? All of my life would have been wasted on invisible beliefs, never truly living to please something that doesn't exist. I'm honestly terrified of that. Who am I to blame one day if they were wrong? I won't be able to blame anyone because it'll be too late. That doesn't seem like a way to live life. It's already too late for me to have a childhood. I just hope someone can ease my fears until I can afford to talk to a professional, so I'll keep my DMs open for any advice despite seeing a few comments calling me and the band cowards for not doing the walkout. It hurts to see comments saying that we gave hope for future generations of Christianity because Christianity is my parents' reason for never giving me a childhood. I'm done with Christianity because of that fear. I don't have enough substantial evidence to base my life on a what-if invisible God, and I'm already 17 having barely lived at all. I want to go to college, live a little, sometimes drink and date someone not in church because it's my last chance before 9-5 working for the rest of my life. But I can't do that with constant guilt from purity and everything else extreme Christians try to guilt you with. Many thought I was passionate about Christianity from my last posts. But to be honest, I've hated Christianity long before this mess as a result of my distaste for homeschooling. It just felt good to be able to stick it to the church with the band's walkout idea and eventual post, using their scriptures against them for a change. But by no means am I passionate about Christianity when so many people use it to control lives like mine through homeschooling. And I hate that I know so much of the Bible too. And when you add how hateful and politically infused it has become in recent years, I want nothing to do with it because I don't want to be associated with it. Fooled my cheating wife into thinking I was unfaithful, then ghosted her on Christmas Day after meticulously planning a year-long revenge. Here's the backstory. My future ex-wife is my high school sweetheart. We started dating in 1992, when we were both 17. We're both 45 and have been together since. She is the only woman I've ever been with in my life. We married 5 years later, at the age of 22, right out of college. A year later, we welcomed our first 2 children, both boys who are now 22 and 17. I gave her 23 years, built her a home, and worked tirelessly to provide her the life she desired. Sure, we had our issues, but what marriage doesn't? Even in the darkest of situations, we found a way to persevere and emerge stronger, making the revelation of her affair all the more startling. Flashback to March 2020. I had a feeling something wasn't right. We had been in a funk for approximately 2 months before. I was still unable to move while recovering from reconstructive knee surgery after tearing my ACL in the fall of 2019. At the time, my knee had only around 55% range of motion, which hindered my ability to conduct a variety of household tasks. I was out on workers' compensation because I was injured on the job, so I couldn't do my usual housework. My sons did their best, but duties that only I could do had to be postponed, or my wife had to take them on, which she detested. Things also came to a standstill in the bedroom. It had already slowed down before my crash, but in my current state, it came to a complete stop. During these months, Sue, we'll call her that, spent more time after work mingling with co-workers. From November 2019 until March 2020, it was a reoccurring event for her. Naturally, I rejected it. I'd had no reason to be concerned or wary of her over the previous 23 years. She had her friends, I had mine, and we had mutual pals. I could hang out with my friends all the time without issue. Everything was above board. However, in January of that year, I started to notice something unusual. Sue was growing increasingly distant. Sure, we were in a funk, but she had never denied me affection until that time. The usual hugs and kisses came to a stop. Her phone, which had previously been nearly tethered to her hand, was now secure. She was becoming more private, despite the fact that she was frequently sharing DIY ideas, recipes and memes with me. Her interactions with me became more snippy, as if she couldn't be bothered. So we're now in March. COVID has arrived, and New York City is under lockdown. Our chosen vocations are essential, thus neither of us had to work from home. I had just been cleared to return to work after being out for 5 months and I was eager to go back to it. 5 months of sitting on my ass, rehabbing my knee and being unable to do physical things drove me insane. For context, I adore physical activities. I'm an active martial artist who goes to the gym 4 days a week, in addition to all of the housework I handle. Within a week or two of the lockout, my soon-to-be ex-wife informed me that she would need to resume working extra hours. I didn't think much of it because of her profession. I expected it to be every other day, but it was every day, for more than an hour or two. She'd get home 3 or more hours later, shower, spend some time with me and our 17-year-old son. Our 22-year-old was staying with his girlfriend across town, and then go straight to bed. As my knee recovered more movement, we continued our intimacy, but as one might anticipate, she was not intellectually or emotionally present as I quickly noticed. By early April the picture was getting clearer for me. All of the signs led to her having an affair. That was the moment I realized I needed answers. I scoured the internet for indicators of adultery in a partner and she checked almost every box. My search query grew to how do I find proof? I started with her social media, looking over her Facebook posts from several months ago. It was the usual, images of us and our sons, some with her friends, and some from her nights out with coworkers. These images included a mix of her closest coworkers and a few folks I had never met. But one thing stood out. Practically every picture featured the same guy. Every photograph he appeared in showed him standing uncomfortably close to her, his arm on her shoulder or his hand on her lower back. Far too close for a guy I'd never met. Needless to say, that left a nasty taste in my mouth, but it was far from the worst of it. The worst part was realizing he was her Facebook friend and Instagram following. So naturally, I searched for his Facebook account, only to discover that I had been barred. Why the hell was I unable to view this guy's Facebook profile when he was friends with her? At this point, I was in full Batman detective mode. I wasn't even attempting to deny it. I knew she was cheating on me with this man. My goal became to learn how long it had been going on. That was exactly what I did in April and May. Until then, I had no idea how much data could be pulled from phone records, text messages and email archives. We have a family cell phone contract, so I had access to a significant amount of data. My soon-to-be ex-wife's data history revealed that the 2 most common phone numbers she used between October 2019 and April 2020 were mine and one I had never seen before. Can you guess whose number it was? A quick Google search revealed that the individual in the photographs was the identical one who had blocked me on Facebook. We'll just name him P since that's who he is. The picture is clearer at this point, but many of their discussions and texts were disjointed, so she deleted a big number of them. I knew she was cheating on me with this person. But the statistics didn't prove it. I needed more evidence. At this point, I told my best friend Oz what I had discovered. He asked if I had questioned her with facts. I said no because I felt it wasn't enough. That's when he told me of an app I might use to track her communications in real time. I won't mention the name here because of the rules, but I installed it, linked it to our data plan, and waited. Within days, I saw it. A text exchange between the two of them, discussing how much fun they had the night before and making plans to do it again that weekend. Boom. Gut punch. To say I was devastated is an understatement. I suppose that was my D-Day. For the next 2 days, I was completely broken. I purposefully distanced myself from her. During the 2 days after D-Day, she noticed something was wrong. She tried to console me and ask what was wrong, but I ignored her and walked away. I couldn't even look at her. This woman to whom I had given 23 years of my life, everything I could as a husband, and she had left our marriage for a man barely 5 years older than our eldest child. By the 3rd day, I was no longer depressed, but enraged. I emailed Oz to inform him that my suspicions were confirmed. He asked if I confronted her and I responded no. I sought retaliation. I didn't just want to divorce her, I wanted to destroy her. I planned to undermine her life and ruin her. It would take some time, but I had a plan. In my studies and research on infidelity, I came across a statement that struck a chord with me. The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability. That was going to be the core of my strategy. I meant to make her life hell on wheels while quietly planning my escape. So it's early June and I still have the app installed. Almost every night I gather as much data as possible. I see their back and forth texts. They talk like they're in a full-fledged relationship, sexting, flirty romantic things, nudes, the works. At that point, I stopped looking at anything and focused solely on gathering information and cataloging everything on my personal server. Meanwhile, I began engaging in odd behaviors. I began leaving at irregular hours and arriving home much later than she did. I spent more time on my phone than usual while with her, and when she asked what I was doing, I just replied, "Just stuff," and put it away. I also changed the login credentials for everything so she couldn't get into any of my stuff. Throughout our marriage, we had never kept anything from one another. However, about the time I believe her romance started, she changed her Facebook and phone passwords, blaming recent security breaches. Yeah, that's an excellent reason to conceal an affair from your husband. I notified Oz about my plans, as well as my older sister and 2 other close friends. These are the people I trust with my life, and I have sworn them to secrecy. To clarify, Oz and I have been friends since we were children. We've known Joey and Na, our other 2 friends, since high school. Keep Na in mind, she will have a role later on. In July, my soon-to-be ex-wife was absolutely paranoid. She was texting and calling me more frequently, asking whether I'd be home when she got back, when I was coming home, what I was doing and so on. I could see the seed I planted in her mind a month ago starting to sprout, notably in her interactions with P. She was confiding in him, expressing her worries and perplexity, and warning him that I was becoming cold and distant. This woman has a lot of nerve. During these interactions with P, she even suggested that they stop meeting at our house since she wasn't sure if I'd just show up, confirming of course that she had brought this guy into my home. Thanks, Sue. P asked her in that conversation if she was afraid I was cheating on her, which irritated her. I can't tell you how much pleasure and laughter I had from reading that exchange. My cheating wife arguing with her affair partner about whether she was angry at her husband for perhaps cheating on her. Oh, how ironic. Please bear in mind that I was not hooking up with anyone. When I left the house, I was usually at Oz's or Joey's, drinking, watching fights and socializing with my brothers. Or I was at my big sister's house, hanging out with her and my brother-in-law, who is like an older brother to me. My sister is 52, and her husband is 58. I had told them about my soon-to-be ex-wife's infidelity, but not about my plan. I couldn't risk it because my brother-in-law is a bit of a blabbermouth. Moving forward to October, things started to heat up. Sue was completely aware that I was intentionally drifting away from her after 3 months of my false romance. I hadn't touched her once between the day I carried out my plan and the day she confronted me, October 20th, 2020. No embraces, kisses, or attempts to initiate intimacy, none. Not that she needed it. She still got it from P, whether at his place or in a hotel. That afternoon she called me at work, which was not unusual before anything began, but it hadn't happened in a while. She implored me to come home immediately from work, saying she had something essential to tell me. I won't lie, I partly expected her to admit her infidelity. However, she didn't. Instead I returned home and asked her whether I was furious with her. The nerve. She commented that I'd spent much too much time away from home, hadn't shown her any affection, and that our intimacy had faded. She expressed fear that I was driving her away because of my animosity for how she treated me when I was rehabbing my knee. Then came the punchline. She gasped and asked whether I was cheating on her. Folks, I fell to the floor laughing hysterically. And by hysterically, I mean like the Joker laughing so hard. On the surface, it appeared to her that I was laughing at the prospect of being unfaithful, but I was actually laughing at the irony of the circumstances. I was on the floor for over 2 minutes, weeping and banging my fists in hysterics before I could calm myself and react. I sat up, looked her in the eyes for the first time in months, shook my head and did not speak. I got up, brushed myself off, kissed the top of her head and started settling in for the night. Later that night, as I was in my office, I wanted to see what she was messaging P about what had just happened. I opened the app, and sure enough, they were texting in real time. She told P, "I know he's cheating on me. I questioned him tonight and he simply laughed in my face. He collapsed on the floor and laughed for almost 5 minutes. It did not take 5 minutes. He no longer cares about my feelings. I'm not sure how or why, but he's left. I realize I've lost him. This is karma, and I know it." The smile I had on my face while reading must have looked like the Cheshire Cat. Her heart was breaking. P tried to console her, telling her that if I cared enough about her, she wouldn't have had to turn to him for what I wasn't giving her. Her statements, however, suggested that she was now having doubts. She had the audacity to quit our marriage because I was unable to perform my duties as a husband due to a real injury, and she pursued the affair for approximately a year. But was the thought of losing me to another woman enough to make her reconsider? What a weakling. Throughout this, I was also implementing the second component of my strategy, getting my finances in order. In September, I met with a family attorney to start the divorce process. With the material I had gathered up to that point, I was convinced I could nail her to the wall in a divorce case, especially because New York is an at-fault state. My lawyer advised me to prepare all of my accounts in anticipation of the approaching asset division. I went a step further, secretly removing all of my funds from our joint account and deposited them into my own. As part of the second phase, I began searching for an apartment. Now it's November, and my behavior hasn't changed. In fact, I have turned it up. This is when my friend Na enters the picture. Na and Sue were never close. I met Na during my freshman year of high school, 2 years before meeting Sue. Sue saw Na as a threat, even though she was my closest female friend. Sue always gave Na an implied "I don't trust her" vibe. Sue never addressed it directly, but it was obvious to everyone paying attention. Na, on the other hand, felt no affection for Sue. Na pointed out early in my relationship with Sue that she was imposing herself on our social circle, but I did not do the same for Sue's friends. That infuriated Na since she knew why Sue was doing it. Sue still doesn't have any male friends in her circle, save for P, but Na is the only female in mine. Na had been kept overseas because of the epidemic before returning to New York City on November 3rd. Oz, Joey and I decided to celebrate her return by hosting a modest dinner and drinks party at Joey's house. There were just 5 of us: Oz, Joey, Joey's wife, Na's sister, Na, and me. We followed the CDC's guidelines because we take COVID seriously. Na, being the mastermind that she is, concocted a sinister scheme to enrage Sue. She suggested we take some photos of Sue and P, similar to those I found months ago, and post them on Facebook. This is precisely what we did. Sue learned about it on the 5th, when a few friends viewed my updates and saw how uncomfortably close Na and I appeared in the images. Sue was perplexed by this, especially because she still suspected I was cheating. I'm almost convinced she wanted to accuse Na, but she knew Na had been in Europe for the majority of the year. Still, it didn't stop her from attempting to dress me down that night since, as she described it, I was handsy in the pictures. I recognized this as a good opportunity to deliver the opening jab for my knockout punch. I inquired, "So how about the images of you and P from last year? He was really handsy in them, but did you notice how upset I was about it?" Deer in headlights. It was the first time I'd mentioned the guy's name in all of this. The hamster wheel in her head began to whirl in real time as she struggled to understand those photographs. She had no idea I had seen them up until that time. That's how rarely I use Facebook. When I do, it's like an event for others, which is why the images with Nina drew so much attention in our networks. She explained them away. "He's like that with everyone. He's just a very friendly guy. I get how it appears, but there is nothing there. I am sorry if the photographs offended you. I'll erase them." No, the photographs were not the cause of my problems. The thought of you banging this guy for a year while lying to me about working extra hours and hanging out with friends has destroyed me. However, as Lieutenant Worf from Star Trek TNG memorably stated, vengeance is a dish best served cold. Sue became overly attached and attentive to me following that night, which was frustrating. She'd want to begin warmth and closeness, but I'd stop her at every opportunity. I was constantly recording whatever she said to P. By this point I had gone entirely numb. Any motivation I had to save my marriage was gone. I checked out on the day I executed the first phase of my strategy. She was telling him that I had gotten worse, that she didn't know what to do and that she believed I detested her. I did. Then she dropped the bombshell. She announced she could no longer see P. Her guilt was intense, and she felt like punishment was strangling her. She couldn't risk losing me. She claimed to love P deeply, but she was still in love with me and sought to save her marriage before losing me. No, my sweetheart. You were about 8 months too late for that. P lost it, saying beautiful things like, "He doesn't love you the way I love you. You are making a mistake. You can't just dismiss me like that." That text chain was their last until around 3 weeks ago. Sue was in uncertainty for the rest of November and December, trying to figure out where my headspace was while also unsure whether I was being unfaithful. Meanwhile, P was constantly blowing up her phone. But she did not respond. I noticed her checking her phone regularly, but she quickly set it aside. Meanwhile, phase 2 of the plan was officially finished. The divorce papers were completed. I'd found a studio apartment in Co-op City, a neighborhood recognizable to New Yorkers, and signed a 2-year contract. All of my money was in my own account. I was ready to throw my haymaker. Now it is Thanksgiving. My oldest son and his girlfriend were throwing a modest reunion for our immediate families, which included my oldest, his girlfriend, her parents, she is an only child, myself, Sue, and our youngest. We had a great night. My oldest girlfriend is training to be a chef, and she did all of the cooking herself. Let me tell you, the chick can cook. To give the impression that nothing was wrong between Sue and me, I expressed affection for her several times that evening, including kisses on the cheek, charming small hugs, and wrapping my arms over her shoulders from behind. She was aware of and loved the gestures. Keep in mind that this was the first time I had touched her since kissing the top of her head the night she confronted me in October, roughly 2 months prior. I won't lie, I was horrified by it, but I had no choice. I could not jeopardize the plan. My distancing from her in front of our sons, my oldest's girlfriend, and her parents would raise alarms. My youngest elected to spend the night with his elder brother, so Sue and I returned home. On the drive home, she thanked me for being so nice to her and said, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." I had to stop myself from busting out laughing again and answered, "I know, I just need time." For the first time since spring, we had sex that evening. I thought, what the hell? With what I'm going to do, I might as well get some work done before eliminating her from my life. I won't get into specifics, but it wasn't love. When I finished, she was a ball of flesh laying there, trying to figure out which way the truck that had run her over had gone. There will be no cuddling or anything afterwards. To her amazement, I just got up, washed, and fell asleep in my office. However, I wore a condom for the first time in nearly 2 decades. She was perplexed, but she didn't ask questions. I had no intention of going raw on her, knowing she had done so with P for months. I awakened the next day and launched my handy surveillance program. For the first time in weeks, she responded to P. The dude went full Neela. He expressed his feelings for her, saying she was wasting her time trying to rekindle a dying flame in me, and that she had been in prison with me for 23 years and deserved to feel the love and affection of a man who adored her. Mind you, this guy is 27 years old, only 5 years older than our oldest son, and he was that asterisk hurled at a 45-year-old married mother of 2. What a fantastic high-quality guy she chose to destroy our marriage and the home we had built for ourselves. Isn't he a beautiful boy with a compassionate side? She responded by saying essentially the same thing she had when they last spoke. She loved him and enjoyed their time together, but she couldn't lose me. She stated that I was still the love of her life, but there would always be a place in her heart for him, and they could be friends if he so wished. But their physical relationship had ended. He persuaded her to meet him one last time that week, and she consented. One more for the road, right? Who am I to say anything? That's just what I did to her the night before. Of course, I saved all of this in the archive I had built. On December 4th, the third and final phase of Operation Shinobi Ghost started. The divorce paperwork was completed, My new place of residence was established, and now I needed to gradually begin moving my possessions out of the house. But first, I needed to tell my boys. That Friday night, I invited my oldest to join me at my office. I laid everything out on the table, except for the specifics. Their mother had been cheating on me for about a year, and I was preparing to file for divorce. My 17-year-old was particularly touched by this since he had recently experienced his first taste of infidelity. His first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months previously. The notion of his own mother being capable of doing such a thing tore his heart apart for the second time. My oldest handled it much better and suggested that he take his brother in to live with him until everything was settled, which I agreed to. We packed some of his possessions and he inquired, "Are you going to be okay?" I replied, "Yes, youngster, I am going to be okay, as are you. We will be all right, I promise." Then they were gone. The most difficult part was now accomplished and it was time to arm the nuclear weapons. Over the next 2 weeks, Oz would help me remove some of my most sensitive belongings out of the house on a regular basis. I gave him a list of everything he needed to get while Sue and I were at work and left him with a spare key. Sue would not have realized anything was missing until someone told her. I also obtained a new phone and phone number, which I shared with everyone who needed to know: Oz, Joey, my boys, my big sister, and my mother. Meanwhile, I continued the deception with Sue and she had no idea. I gave her bits and pieces of affection to keep her off the trail while she was still in contact with P, not as much as before, but there was still an emotional connection. The fog was faint, but still there. All the while, I was gathering, and I mean everything. Every bit of data I'd saved since the beginning of the plan, call logs, texts, images, emails, everything, and printing it. I must have spent over $1,500 on Staples supplies like printer ink, paper and binders. I organized everything chronologically from the beginning of the affair to the end 2 weeks ago in December. 14 binders. I then placed each one in a box, gift-wrapped it, and addressed it to a variety of people, including my mother. My father died 7 years ago, her parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department. Did I mention P works for the same company, and there is an express rule against intercompany relationships because of the nature of what she does. Several of her friends, P and her parents. I took all of those parcels to the post office and got them shipped out on December 16th. Delivery is scheduled between December 22nd and December 24th. Perfect. So we are now on Christmas Eve. Sue returns home at the usual time, unsure if she has seen P. On the 18th, I stopped tracking her on the app, believing I'd gotten enough use out of it. As usual, she showers, spends time with me, and then I blow her out on the living room couch. Then she retires for the night. The final stage had arrived. The nuclear weapon I had been constructing since June was about to be fired. I arose in the middle of the night and wrapped one of the 3 remaining binders with the divorce papers glued to the inner cover, then placed it on my side of the bed with a Merry Christmas greeting. Next to it, I left my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I packed up the rest of my most important items, enough to fill 2 backpacks, and left the house I'd lived in for 23 years for the final time. That was a week ago, buddies. Sue believes that I have vanished, been shadowed, or ghosted. She is blocked on Facebook, but she hasn't blocked me, so I'm keeping track of the effects. It's simply great. My packages have arrived at their destinations and Sue has been crucified. Her younger sister dressed her completely down. Both of her parents have condemned her. My mother totally destroyed her, like holy crap. I know my mother is harsh, but what she called Sue was ridiculous. Sue has been feverishly trying to find out whether anyone knows where I am, but those who do are not saying anything. She's desperately attempting to contact me all over her Facebook feed, possibly because she knows I'm looking. But I won't say anything to her without my lawyer present. That'll be the next time I share oxygen with her. She can't use the narrative to make me appear bad because I've exposed her to everyone she cares about. According to a mutual acquaintance who works for the same company, she and P will be placed on administrative leave starting tomorrow. So, excellent news, she will most certainly be unemployed by 2021. Regarding the final 2 binders, one has been delivered to my lawyer as the final piece of evidence for my impending divorce. The last one I stored in my storage unit, to be burnt in Joey's fire pit after the divorce is finalized. Do I feel sad about it? Not in the least. For 23 years, I treated her well. I gave her the home she wanted, the family she sought, the life I thought we both deserved, and unconditional love. Never did I falter. Never did I stray. Never did I consider breaking my vows. When an issue developed that I suspected was interfering with our marriage, I addressed her and explained the situation, and we worked together to remedy it as best we could. She chose to seek solace in another man's bed rather than come to me and communicate her discontent with her current intimate situation. She decided to go out with a young punk who gave her tingles. So no, I'm not sorry for whatever I did to or for her. I do not care if she ends up in hell. The most I could lose is my home, a car, and possibly a few $100s each month in alimony. However, because the divorce is filed under the adultery statute in New York State, which is an at-fault state, this may be waived based on the overwhelming evidence I've shown. She's dead to me, and I'll never look back. Quick edit. Under certain circumstances, NYS is not fully to blame. Yet a divorce can be filed at fault, as my lawyer has advised me. I'll meet with the soon-to-be ex-wife and her lawyer tomorrow. I suppose I will just post an update here. Update. I deceived my unfaithful soon-to-be ex-wife into thinking I was cheating, then disappeared and served her on Christmas Day. Christmas Day was the first full day I spent in my new apartment. It's still a work in progress because I want to buy more stuff, but I consider it my home because I'll be here for at least 2 years. My boys and the eldest girlfriend came over and spent most of the day with me. The girlfriend brought over homemade snacks and made a great lunch. I got to sit down and talk to my sons in a way I hadn't in a long time, which was nice. My big sister also stopped over with additional snacks and hung out with us. It was the first time she had seen her nephews in nearly a year. Having all of them there was extremely beneficial to me because I feel I would have drunk myself to death if I had been alone. Everyone left about 8 p.m., and I decided to go hang out with Joey and his wife Claudia. I hung out with them for a few hours, had a few beers, and then headed home. The next important advancement happened last week, on December 29, 2020. Nina texted me about midday, asking whether I was busy that night. I of course was not, so we agreed to meet after I ended work. She showed up and we went to a diner near where I worked. We're doing indoor eating at 25% capacity in NYC thanks to the Rona, but there's rarely a wait because many of us don't eat out very much these days. Regardless, once we were seated and had ordered our dinner, Nina essentially laid all of her cards on the table. And I knew what was coming. She basically admitted that she had liked me since we were teenagers but never had the opportunity to tell me because Sue swooped in and took me before she could. For context, I've known Nina for 2 years longer than Sue. As previously said, she is the fourth point on my social square, with myself, Oz and Joey. We were the social misfits in high school, raver youngsters who didn't fit into any of the other cliques. Nina struggled with her weight and developed diabetes. She was the heavy-set goth lady who was really cool, but no man ever looked twice at her. However, we have always had chemistry. Nina now works as a personal trainer and yoga instructor. She was the ugly duckling that grew into a stunning swan, if I may say so. Long story short, we decided to start dating after my divorce was finalized, and yes, I slept with her that night. We went back to my new house and had a terrific time. Am I ashamed of having slept with her? Hell no. Nina has been a more valuable friend to me than Sue ever was. That's not to say Sue wasn't my best friend, but Nina has always been there for me over the nearly 25 years I've known her, even standing back from her own feelings to allow me to pursue and eventually create a relationship with Sue. That moved me on a level I did not expect. That amount of selflessness for another person is the essence of true love. I know it sounds like I'm just convincing myself that sleeping with her was the right decision, but it was. And I aim to devote my complete attention to discovering what lies ahead for Nina and me. On to yesterday. Yesterday, I met with my wife and her lawyer to talk about our divorce. It's been 2 weeks since I ghosted my soon-to-be ex-wife. This past Monday, I received a phone call alerting me that Sue's attorney had set a conference with us to discuss the terms of divorce for January 6, 2021, which was yesterday. I met with my lawyer on Tuesday morning to discuss the terms I wanted. Sue filed for an uncontested divorce due to spousal neglect. My terms include a comprehensive distribution of assets, and I will sell her half of the house ownership. She may keep it. We keep our cars in good working order. I keep my Poconos cabin, and under the pretense of marital neglect, she receives no spousal support from me. My 17-year-old son, whom I will refer to as 17 inches from now on, is free to choose who he wants to live with following the divorce, which will most likely be me. So on Wednesday, I arrived at my lawyer's office dressed as Johnny Cash. My wife and her attorney were there, and she looked like a wreck, barely holding it together. I gave her a stern look. I won't burden you with legal language, but her lawyer proposed terms of reconciliation. I dismissed them almost as soon as she finished explaining the contents of the request. Long story short, we agreed on a formal separation that would result in an uncontested divorce. The only modification is that I will pay her $653 per month in temporary spousal support to cover the cost of utilities until she finds work again. Yes, she was fired for messing about with P. He was also let go. I agreed to pay for up to a year after the finalization. I make enough money that it won't hurt me financially if she takes her time looking for a new job, and she has enough savings to last a long time. She is alone after a full calendar year since the divorce was finalized. A little price to pay for getting rid of her crooked ass. Things will take around 3 months to finish, so provided nothing goes wrong, I should be rid of her by early April. After the meeting, my lawyer said his goodbyes and promised to call me to keep me informed on the status of the filing. Sue followed me down the street pleading, "Can we talk?" I figured I'd provide her with at least that. She remained calm during the discussion but burst into tears outside, apologizing and explaining that she never intended for it to get as far as it did. She explained that she never anticipated falling in love with P, but when she felt I was cheating, she realized how terrible it was to betray her own marriage in this manner. She begged me if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive her, and if we could try again in a few years. She can't imagine her life without me. I advised her to start envisioning it right away because it would be the last time I spoke or saw her. I informed her that 17 inches is virtually a man and capable of making his own decisions about his future. I claim I gave her half of my life and all of my unconditional love, but she, in her own words, fell in love with another man. I will never forgive her. My feelings for her were progressively drained during the months she confided in and confessed her love to P, rather than approaching me and telling me she was dissatisfied with how things were going between us. I told her that I used to love who she was, but now I loathe who she is, and that if I never see her again, it will be too soon. Here we are, on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, with her causing a commotion and weeping her eyes out. A few individuals strolled by, throwing sideways glances, but I didn't mind. I didn't want to disgrace her in public. I'd already wrecked her socially and professionally, but I needed to demonstrate my last ounce of affection for her. I concluded by telling her that I had no regrets about being her husband for the previous 23 years. I despised the fact that, after 23 years, she believed that the simplest solution was the best one. And, here's the kicker, I owe this one to the nice kids of __ on Reddit, because it came to me only seconds before I said it. For 23 years, I thought you were mine, but it turns out it was just my turn. Then I inserted my Raycons, turned around and walked away. Later that night, her father contacted me to apologize. He compliments me on always being a nice father to his daughter, admits he is ashamed of her, and claims he raised her better than she did. I won't lie, I'll miss the old man. My father died years ago. Therefore he has always been my default father figure. But after that call, I doubt I'll be able to communicate with anyone in her family. That night, I went on Facebook and symbolically changed my relationship status to divorced. Yay! It's not finished yet, but in my opinion, it is. As previously said, when I post on Facebook it is deemed an event, thus several people contacted me via Messenger with questions. I explained everything, including the fact that I filed for divorce from Sue earlier that day. Of course, Nina called, surprised that I had pulled the trigger so swiftly. Obviously when we spoke, I was already in the process, but she had no idea how far along it was. When I asked her if she could come over, she bolted. We knocked boots again, but this time she stayed the night. We slept in my bed and spoke till early in the morning, and I haven't felt this relieved and connected in a long time. Nina understands me, and I can't get enough of being with her. She's been the only thing on my mind since she confided in me. Yeah, I know some people may think I'm __ up for moving on so quickly, but as far as I'm concerned, my marriage ended the day P let Sue touch his pecker, so I'm ready to go on. So wonderful, that is it, that's the end. My divorce is in the works, and I am starting a relationship with Nina. I know I mentioned in a statement to someone that I'd probably never marry again, but that was before Nina told me about her emotions for me, and I can't deny that I feel the same way now. We're planning to take things slowly and won't make any announcements until Sue's divorce is legal and formal. I don't care what happens to Sue. She could move P into our old house for all I care. I'll receive my house payment in 4 quarterly installments throughout 2021, and aside from the $653 I'll deposit directly into her savings account each month, I'll never see or communicate with her again. I am eternally grateful to everyone who has expressed encouragement, support and gratitude. The soon-to-be ex-wife of 23 years attempted suicide last night. The hits keep coming. I've been sitting here for hours and wasn't sure where to put it, but this sub seemed appropriate. So if you're looking for some backstory, check out my post history. I'm not sure how the connection to other subscribers works here, but my previous 2 entries are shown in my profile. Here's a quick version. I found out that my wife of 23 years, 45F, was having an affair with a 27-year-old coworker. We have 2 sons, aged 22 and 17. I created a plan to severely disrupt her life, with the goal of convincing her that I was having an affair of my own. I continued the ruse for more than 4.5 months while gathering evidence of her infidelity, obtaining divorce papers and planning my exit strategy. Slowly moving my personal belongings from our house to a new apartment, getting a new phone and number, separating my half of our shared income from our joint account, and so on. On December 16, 2020, I gathered all of the evidence of her affair that I had compiled, printed it from beginning to end, filed it in 14 binders, packed 11 in gift-wrapped boxes, and mailed it all to the most important people in her life, as well as her HR department, with an ETA of December 22, 2020. On Christmas Eve, while she slept, I took one of the remaining 3 binders and repeated the process, but this time I glued the divorce notice to the inside cover and placed it on my side of the bed. Mind you, she had her affair there several times, along with my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I shadow ghosted her. Her life fell apart during the next 4 days. Her family had effectively excommunicated her. Her friends, who were uninformed of the affair, shunned her, and my mother reprimanded her, calling her the most vile and derogatory insults you could imagine. Her lover and she were both put on administrative leave and eventually fired. We had our divorce hearing last week and agreed on a formal separation that will result in an uncontested divorce, subject to a few requirements for transitional income because she is still unemployed. I'll pay for the utilities, $653 per month, until she finds a job or until 1 year after the divorce is finalized, which is expected in 3 months. She keeps her home, car, and half of the marital assets. I keep half of the assets, which include my car, motorcycle, boat and vacation house, a cabin in the Poconos. Following the hearing, we had one final conversation in which she attempted to excuse her infidelity and pushed me to give her another chance once the divorce was finalized. Of course, I said no, told her some harsh words, and walked away forever. This brings us to last night. Only my closest friends, 2 boys, elder sister and mother have my new contact information, and I have completely blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife from all social media platforms. She has no way to reach me since I left her on Christmas Eve, but several of our mutual acquaintances do. Last night, I was sitting at my apartment when I received a voice call notification on Messenger from one of those friends. She was one of the only people who didn't forsake Sue after the affair was uncovered. She did not waste time responding to my message. She informed me that she had gone to check on Sue, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and discovered her passed out in the bedroom, foaming at the mouth with 2 empty pill bottles beside her. Sue was in the intensive care unit, in critical but stable condition, and the doctor anticipated she'd recover. Sue had pleaded with me to come, and her parents and 2 sisters were also hospitalized. My guess is that they were notified after the hospital attempted to tell me, but Sue was still using my old phone number as her emergency contact. I merely told her friend, no. Sue is no longer my problem. And that she had clearly decided to take the easy way out rather than face the sorrow and misery of ending her 23-year marriage. I then told her friend that if Sue's family was present, they could help her pick up the pieces, but as far as I'm concerned, there is no Sue and I anymore. I ended the call. I slept on it for a few hours, and my sons called me this morning to find out what occurred. I answered yes, and I told them both that if they wanted to be there to support their mother, I wouldn't judge them for it. She is their mother after all. But I made it clear that I no longer cared what she did with or to herself. They were both taken aback by this, but they acknowledged my position. However, now that the news of her suicide attempt has spread, many of those who abandoned her are coming forward and telling me that I need to be there for her. That regardless of what she did to me, I should assist her in her time of need. I also discovered that her affair partner tried to pay her a visit this morning but was denied permission because he is not a family member. I am being pressed to go see her, but I no longer care about her. I haven't for a long time. I emotionally checked out during the process of collecting my revenge for her betrayal, and I still don't care what happened. Actually, it makes me dislike her even more. She is the one who was unfaithful. She is the one who, after a nearly year-long affair with a man barely 5 years older than our oldest child, decided it was worth jeopardizing 23 years of marriage. And now that she has to face the consequences of her actions, she adopts the most selfish approach. Even though she is expected to survive, she has managed to evoke quick sympathy from people who condemned her weeks ago. Meanwhile, I'm portrayed as the angry ex-husband who refuses to sympathize with her, at least by the bulk of her family. Her father, on the other hand, called me and supported my decision to stay away. I feel as if I never truly knew this woman. After 23 years, it has finally happened. Yes, I get that the way I ended things with her may have left her in a horrible emotional condition, but a whole new bag of worms has opened. Either she had a catastrophic mental breakdown and tried suicide, or she engaged in an extremely risky and deliberate ploy to regain favor with individuals who had only weeks before scolded her for abandoning me. She cheated on me and is now the victim? Sorry if this comes out as a rant, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. I want to be clear. I'm not going to visit Sue. She waived her right to my concern for her well-being the day she permitted P, my personal nickname for her partner, to touch her. This may come across as cruel, but despite my cool, calm and collected exterior throughout the event, my emotions remain raw. But I do not care about this woman. I haven't in a very long time. I am aware that I will be despised by a number of people here, but I do not mind. Think of me any way you choose. If you were in my position, you would interpret her actions very differently. Some of you will search through my post history to see what I did to her. You're going to infer that her suicide attempt was my fault. That tricking her into thinking I was cheating on her when she was actually cheating on me, and then destroying her socially and professionally, was the catalyst for her breakdown. Maybe it was. Maybe I am a callous sociopath. However, as Arthur Fleck famously said, you get what you quite deserve. I devoted half of my life to this woman, doing all in my ability to be the finest husband possible. She admitted that I had no influence over her decision to leave our marriage. She did it for herself. Her selfishness knows no bounds, and I'm relieved to be free of her. If that makes me a bad person because I refuse to visit her and never intend to engage with her again, so be it. I stick to my beliefs. She decided to deceive me. She decided to prioritize her needs over our marriage. So now it's my turn to prioritize myself above all else. I don't mind if she perishes in the depths of hell. Allow people to help her self-improvement. My dedication to her well-being ended when we signed the separation agreement. I simply needed to get this off my chest. If you're going to judge me for how I feel, save it. As I have indicated, despite 23 years and 2 children, I never fully knew this woman. I have no sympathy for her, and never will. Sue's father informed me that she had been transferred from the ICU to the mental health ward. The doctors are still keeping track of her mental health. She is alert and intelligent again, but definitely sleepy. Her father told me she asked if I might come to see her, but he declined. She turned off after that. He gently remarked that he would only provide additional information if I questioned, as he was aware of my mental state. I've also scheduled counseling for my son, who is 17 years old. His first consultation is this coming Monday. Update. The aftermath of my soon-to-be ex-wife's suicide attempt. I'm writing this as a form of therapy, a practical way to convey my ideas. Despite everything I had said in previous blogs and comments, I went to see Sue. She's been out of the hospital for 4 days, and believe it or not, Nina convinced me to see her. Nina explained that the only way I'd be able to let go of my dislike for Sue was to see her one more time in her fragile state. So about 6 p.m., I called Sue for the first time since serving her. Her greeting was not the happy and effervescent one I had grown accustomed to during the previous 2 decades. Her voice seemed harsh and faint. When she heard my voice, she burst into tears. It took her nearly 3 minutes to gather her composure and speak again. Before she could say anything, I told her I'd be there by 8 p.m., and she agreed. My prior home is around an hour to an hour and a half away from Co-op City, where I currently live. I grabbed a bite to eat at the neighborhood pizza and left. I arrived at 7:47 p.m., and she was already at the door when I drove into the driveway. As I neared, I realized the toll her actions had taken on her. She appeared noticeably thinner, the unhealthy kind of emaciated. Overall, she resembled the walking dead. The first thing she tried to do was come in for a hug, but I stopped her. She understood I wasn't there to console her and quickly backed off. We went inside and sat in the living room. Sue almost immediately told me that she wanted to be transparent about everything. She told me she couldn't live with her guilt over what she'd done to me and the boys. She entered a downward spiral of shame and misery after we signed the separation agreement, culminating in her suicide attempt. Her friend, who contacted me from the hospital, saw her behavior and started coming over to check on her. She stated that the doctors told her that if she hadn't been discovered 1 hour earlier, she would have survived. She stated that she had failed me as a wife. That falling for P was a mistake and that she had not backed out when she knew she was in too deep. She also apologized for sharing so much personal information about our marriage and speaking ill of me to him. She confessed she never imagined herself capable of doing such a thing. But she was. She thought she was doing the right thing, but when she discovered I was cheating, it hit her like a ton of bricks. The sensation of betrayal was intense, and she needed to leave as quickly as possible. However, it was definitely too late. She then asked when I had stopped caring. I told her the night she confronted me with such vehemence about my cheating, despite the fact that she had been sleeping with P for months. I lost all respect for her that night, which fueled my drive to follow out my plan. She told me that when she got up on Christmas morning and saw the gift I had left, she was overjoyed, until she opened it. When she realized what it was and how much I knew, she went wild and hasn't entered our bedroom since. She desperately tried to find out if anyone knew where I was, but when she went to Facebook to ask, she was scolded by friends and family for her actions. She wasn't sure how everyone knew so quickly. That's when I informed her about the remaining binders. Her shocked look was priceless. It dawned on her that I had orchestrated everything she had gone through. Her friends turning on her, her family humiliating her, and yes, even her job loss. It was all my fault. She simply fell silent and turned off after that. When I went to use the bathroom, everything was in disarray. The mirror was broken, her skincare supplies were all over the place, and the tub appeared to have not been cleaned since they took her to the hospital. When I returned to the living room, she put her face in her hands, crying. And truthfully, I felt nothing. There is no more anger, rage or sympathy. They say that apathy is the polar opposite of love, and as I looked at her, I felt exactly that. She looked up at me and murmured, "I messed up everything. I harmed us, and I don't know what to do. I can't do it by myself." I told her she had her family, the person who discovered her, and our sons, but not me. She would never do this again. I told her I came to give her closure after the pain she had put herself through, but as I walked out that door, I never looked back. P showed up shortly after. She informed me that he contacted her 2 days earlier. They spoke for a few hours, and she advised him to move on with his life, meet a younger woman and forget about her. Sue spent the remainder of the conversation apologizing for betraying me and asking, "Is this really the end?" Without hesitation, I looked her in the eyes and said, "Yes." It had ended long before I served the divorce papers on Christmas. I assumed it was my indication to leave. There were no further words exchanged since what else could be said. I left her on the couch, closed the door behind me, got in my car and drove home. It's 2:56 a.m. when I write this. I needed to convey it while it was still fresh in my mind. This concludes the Sue saga. My 17-year-old son and I have both been booked for counseling in the coming weeks. Nina and I are still going strong, sticking to our policy of keeping things quiet until my divorce is official. I'm remaining active and motivated, looking forward to a future with a woman I know will cherish and honor me, as she has for decades. It's time for me to focus on the life ahead of me. So, this is probably my last post for a while. Perhaps I'll publish an update after the divorce is official. Thank you to everyone who has supported me and wished me success. To everyone who cheered my retribution plan, I honestly wish it hadn't happened. But if I had to do it again, I wouldn't change anything, except maybe doing more to P than just firing him. And to the one person who attacked me, claiming I deserved it since I raped my wife, you are insane and, yeah, it's time to get my green ass out of here. Update. Where are things and where are they going? It's been just over 2 months since I served my wife's divorce papers, and a month since my previous update, which I said would most likely be my last. But a lot has transpired since that post, and after returning to this account and seeing hundreds of messages and responses, I decided to share what's going on. Before I continue, I'd like to convey my heartfelt appreciation for all of your compassion and support throughout my journey. I am grateful for all of the affection I've received on Reddit and from my family. First, I'd like to address a matter about which many people have expressed concern. My youngest son, who is 17 years old. He began individual counseling only a few days after my last post. I accompanied him to his first 2 sessions, and he has been going on his own ever since. He attends twice a week and it's really helped him. He is doing okay overall, but his trust in relationships has been completely shattered. The long-term consequences of his own adultery, combined with dealing with his mother's cheating and attempted suicide, have left a deep mark that I feel will take decades to heal. I also realized that his experience was worse than he had previously claimed. He discovered his ex-girlfriend making out with someone he thought was a friend, but who had only approached him to get to her. He never told me about this aspect of his breakup. My heart aches for my son, who has had to go through this at such a crucial point in his growth. You do everything you can to protect your children, but life ultimately says, no. He's decided to stay with IC for the long term, and I've told him that if he ever needs to talk to me about anything, nothing is off limits. Next up is my own IC. If you've read most of my articles, you'll see that I have an anger issue, which is odd given that I've always been a reserved and controlled man. But this entire event has certainly awakened a sleeping dragon in me, and it is a true fire breather. I have talked about everything with my therapist, and I mean everything. When I told him what I did to my ex, he was both amazed and appalled, not what I had expected. Apparently, when prodded, I exhibit psychopathic tendencies, which is not surprising given what I have done. My sessions are more structured than dramatic, as I process all that is going on in my mind concerning my marriage's dissolution and attempt to achieve balance. Now, for the elephant in the room, Nina. I'm not sure where I would be without this woman. I never anticipated having such a loving, understanding and nurturing woman by my side to support me through this. We are still going strong, and despite our best efforts to keep our relationship quiet, it is very open within our circle. She just understands me, and has since we were teenagers. Because she understands the misery of having the person you've spent your entire life with cheat on you, she does everything she can to help me cope with my emotions. We alternated between staying in her place and mine. Her 5-year-old opposed the concept of living together. My flat is too small for 3 people and my lease is until 2022. So, for the time being, we'll continue to split time. Nina comes to my house when her kid is with her father and I come to hers when she has her daughter. Speaking of her daughter, I admire her and she has taken a liking to me. I wish I could find the words to describe how important Nina has been to me throughout everything. If you haven't read my previous entries, Nina has secretly loved me since we were sophomores in high school, but she was an ugly duckling who believed she had no chance with me. She deliberately sat by and watched me pursue, date and marry my soon-to-be ex-wife Sue, knowing how she felt. She kept this a secret for nearly 25 years, until a week after my divorce hearing, when we met for dinner and she revealed everything. I feel privileged to have her in my life. We are constantly discussing what the future holds for us. We are not getting married since we have both been burned by marriage, but we have discussed having a civil partnership. We'll probably wait a while before heading down that path, but it's evident that we're destined to be together. Finally, there is Sue, the soon-to-be ex-wife. There isn't much to tell. I haven't spoken to her since her attempted suicide. I have no idea what she is doing and don't want to know. I consider her dead. That is pretty much all. Life goes on. It's March 2nd as I type this, so only 1 month till the divorce is final. By this time next month, I'll be a free man, and I'm counting down the days until I can begin the next chapter in my life. To clarify, I made a mistake when I mentioned being clinically diagnosed as a psychopath. My therapist indicated I have sociopathic tendencies when provoked, so I assumed it was a professional diagnosis. It wasn't, it was just his professional observation. Furthermore, my 22-year-old son had no intention of causing harm to P. He expressed what he did out of wrath. Update, the end and farewell. Sue became my ex-wife on April 13th, exactly 1 month ago. My lawyer first told me that it would go through on the 18th, but because of the reduction of COVID cases here in NYC, it was pushed through a few days earlier. My lawyer, Jeff, called me on April 12th and asked me to come see him the next day. When I did, he handed me the finalization notification and shook my hand. I couldn't leave it at that, so I went in, hugged him, and thanked him for everything he had done for me. On the way home, all I could think about was watching mental movies of everything from the preceding 24 years of my life. All the memories. All the history. When I walked into my flat, it happened. When I hit the floor, all of the emotions that had been bottled up inside me came out. I hadn't sobbed like that in years, and it wasn't a sad cry by any means. My spirit felt as if it had been set free from the lowest, darkest depths. My first call that night was at 22. I kept it brief and nice, implying that it was official and that his mother and I were no longer married as of that day. He asked how I was feeling. I'm sure he could hear my voice that I had been crying, and I answered I was okay. Then 17 got on the phone and we talked for almost 90 minutes. 22 and his fiancée have done a fantastic job of caring for him, and he, like me, continues to receive treatment. I won't go into detail about what we discussed, but I will say that there is still a lot of work to be done, especially with his perspective on relationships. Nina came to see me later that night as she often did, and I certainly told her the news. She simply wrapped her arms around my waist and embraced me tightly, and I cried again. Nina reassured me, "No matter what, I will never betray you, and I love you with all my heart." I know it is all true. I may face some criticism for saying this, but I do not regret the life I built with Sue. Despite everything, she gave me 2 strong sons. But it is clear today that I chose the wrong woman. Nina has given so much in the previous 4.5 months while asking for almost little in return. She only requests that I be there for her. I don't want to go on about her, but she's my actual hero. There have also been a few unexpected events since the divorce was finalized. For example, P approached me immediately. Yes, he messaged me on Reddit. It turns out he saw the story when it went viral on YouTube and immediately recognized it as about him. Before anyone asks, I will not reveal his Reddit username. I think I've made the kids suffer enough. The first thing he did was apologize for his involvement in all of this. He informed me what the results of the binder I sent to his mother were. Essentially, he has been excommunicated by his family. His mother, as I discovered while plotting my retribution, is a devout Catholic woman, the in church 3 days a week, no mea patria spiritus sancti, type of devout. So her views on marriage are sacrosanct, and learning that her son had recently ended a nearly 25-year marriage sent her into a frenzy. She fired him the same day, and he was fired within a week of his employer receiving the binder I provided. He has been couch surfing and seeking a new job ever since. He claimed he wanted to contact me on social media, all the places he blocked me while screwing Sue, but admits he was afraid because, in his words, if I was able to find him before, I could find him again. I admit that I could have totally devastated this youngster, but I chose not to. I asked when he last saw Sue and he said he hadn't in months. Sue told him to forget about her and go on with his life the last time he spoke with her, much like she told me the last time I spoke with her. So she was not lying about it. I asked the boy some additional questions, and he was surprisingly forthcoming. I assume he was seeking some type of restitution for the havoc he had created himself. Much of what he said was consistent with what I had learnt from the text material I got. I didn't say anything. I just asked, and he responded. The talk went on for around 20 minutes until he apologized again. That's when I hit him with this. Copy and paste the following from the conversation. You're a 27-year-old man who must spend the rest of his life knowing that your own mother despises you for ending a marriage that lasted nearly as long as you've been alive. I understand you messaged me because karma is bugging you, but I will not bring you closure. When I was 27, I was building a legacy. You are currently a homeless, unemployed homewrecker. If you are intelligent, you will gain from this lecture. If you are not, you will be a disaster until you reach my age, assuming you live that long. I wish you luck, but you don't need it. You should get your act together. I completed our talk and blocked him. Clearly, this was not the kind of closure he was looking for. And I could have been much more harsh, but I believe those statements are enough to haunt him. The next significant event is Nina's transition into Mrs. Frog on May 4, 2021. Over the last 2 months, we've had extensive discussions about where we want to go. Nina made it abundantly clear that she has no intention of ever being with anyone other than me, and she desires my namesake. She wants to be my wife and has asked me to adopt Anna, her daughter. I've said it before, I adore this kid. She's 6 years old now, her birthday was last month, and she idolizes me. I am the first father figure she has known since her biological father abandoned her when she was 4. Nina has made it a point not to introduce Anna to any man she has been involved with unless they have made a long-term commitment. Needless to say, I have perseverance and experience raising children. Anna and 17 complement each other perfectly. The big brother-little sister dynamic between them is both lovely and sweet. 17 has formed a deep bond to Anna and appreciates it. I told my therapist about it, and he said that's a positive sign. 17 sees the innocence he wishes to preserve in Anna, despite the fact that his own innocence has been shattered. So last Monday, we decided to go to City Hall and pull the trigger. It took 24 hours to receive the marriage license, and the outcome was the most unremarkable ever envisioned. I addressed it as if no one had seen it coming, and Big Sis said, "Now placing bets on when the now expecting post goes up." We thought we were keeping our relationship a secret for months, but practically everyone figured it out. So great. That was hilarious. Some might believe it was too soon, and I've mentioned in earlier remarks that I will never marry again. However, this occurred before Nina and I developed a meaningful relationship. This woman has declared her undying and unconditional love for me. She has cried in my arms, telling me how happy she is and how she never thought she'd be able to be with me. She's gone into great detail about her feelings for me throughout the last 25 years, and how even while married, she mourned the idea that Sue won. I had no idea how deep that rabbit hole was. She even said that she had pondered having an affair with me, but she was never that type of person. Even still, throughout all the years I've known her, she's given me so much while expecting so little in return. Even the woman I married and had 2 children with has never shown me as much affection as Nina does. I'd be silly not to tell her my name. So now she has it, and we are beginning the paperwork for me to adopt Anna. Finally, there's Sue. I haven't spoken with her since my last visit to our marital home 4 months ago, although mutual friends, the ones who remain, send me updates on a daily basis. I learnt from one of those acquaintances, a realtor, that she sold the house and was recruited as a clerical assistant at his company. In doing so, he canceled the assistance payments I was required to make due to her unemployment. She currently lives in a little apartment near his office, which he also helped build. She is still functional, but she is a shadow of the woman she once was. She has acquired little weight and keeps to herself. She comes in, does her work, and rarely interacts with anyone other than him. Most likely since her work-related socializing is where it all started. The last time I heard from her was at the end of March, when I thanked him for watching out for her but advised him that I didn't need any further information. She's no longer my problem. I'm almost certain she knows about Nina and myself, as numerous of our surviving common friends have mentioned us. With 17 just a year away from becoming a legal adult, I have no need to speak with her again, and I won't. And that's it. My journey through betrayal, vengeance, attempted suicide, and mental pain is complete. I'll answer questions and leave a few remarks, but after that, I'm returning to the swamp to live with my new frog bride and her tiny tadpole. Thank you to the thousands of people who have offered me advice, best wishes and compliments during this process. The opportunity to tell my story and help others dealing with the pain of infidelity has humbled and blessed me. I enjoy the new friends I've met on Reddit. I never imagined meeting such attractive people in a place where blatantly negative things might be spoken. Keep it green and pleasant. Reddit.